The day Caleb Blackwell looked directly at the new maid and blinked twice deliberately, Rosa Martinez knew she'd stumbled into something far darker than a job cleaning a billionaire's mansion. For 10 years, everyone believed the twin boys were blind mute trapped in their own minds. But Rosa saw what the doctors missed. They weren't broken. They were prisoners. And the woman holding the key, their own grandmother. This is the story of how one woman's courage shattered a decade of lies. Before we begin, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. This story will shake you to your core. And comment below with your city name so I can see how far this truth travels across the world. They don't see anything. They don't hear anything. They never will. Dr. Margaret Blackwell said those words like a judge passing sentence. Rosa Martinez stood in the grand foyer of the Blackwell mansion holding her cleaning supplies, watching two 10-year-old boys being wheeled past her in matching chairs. Their heads lolled to one side. Drool collected at the corners of their mouths. Their eyes stared at nothing. Nobody said good morning to them. Nobody touched them except to move their chairs. They were ghosts. "You'll clean the East Wing first," Margaret continued, heels clicking against marble. "The boys' rooms are off limits until after medication hours. 9 a.m. and 6 p.m., you don't deviate from the schedule. You don't interact with them beyond basic hygiene. Understand?" Rosa nodded, but her eyes stayed on the twins. The one on the left. She'd learned his name was Caleb. Tilted his head slightly when Margaret's voice rose, like he was listening. "Mrs. Blackwell, what are their names?" Rosa asked. Margaret stopped, turned. Her expression could freeze fire. "Their names are irrelevant to your duties. You were hired to clean, not to bond." That was day one. Rosa had taken this job because she needed the money. Her daughter Maria was starting college in the fall. Rosa's husband had died 3 years ago, leaving debts that swallowed everything. She'd cleaned houses for 15 years. She knew how to be invisible, how to keep her head down, how to cash the check and forget what she saw. But 5 years ago, Rosa had lost her son Miguel. He was 8. A doctor prescribed the wrong medication, too high a dose for a child his size. Miguel had a seizure in his sleep and never woke up. The doctor called it an unfortunate miscalculation. The hospital settled quietly. Rosa buried her boy and swore she'd never stay silent again if she saw medicine being used wrong. Now, watching these two children slumped in their chairs like sedated prisoners, something in Rosa's chest cracked open. That first week, she learned the rules. Ethan Blackwell left for his office at dawn and came home after dark. Margaret controlled everything: staff schedules, the boys' medical records, which rooms locked and which didn't. The twins received pills 4 times a day delivered by Margaret on a silver tray. Nobody questioned what was in those cups. The mansion had 52 rooms. Only 5 felt alive. The rest were museums to a family that had stopped existing. But Rosa noticed things the rules didn't cover. Nathan, the twin on the right, turned his head toward the window when birds sang outside. Caleb's fingers twitched when music played somewhere in the house. Both boys breathed differently when Margaret left the room. Slower, deeper, like they'd been holding their breath. On day 8, Rosa broke her first rule. She was cleaning the boys' playroom, though calling it a playroom was cruel. It was spotless, untouched, filled with toys still in packaging and books with uncracked spines. The twins sat near the window, motionless, while Margaret attended a conference call downstairs. Rosa walked over to Nathan and knelt. "Can you hear me, sweetheart?" Nothing. His eyes stared past her. She placed her hand on his. His skin was warm, his pulse steady. "If you can hear me, squeeze my hand. Just once. Nobody will know." 10 seconds passed. 20. Rosa felt foolish. Margaret was right. These boys were gone. She started to pull away. Nathan's pinky finger curled against her palm. Rosa's heart stopped. She looked at his face, still blank, still empty, but that finger, that deliberate movement. "Oh God," she whispered. "You're in there." Footsteps. Margaret's heels. Rosa jerked back, grabbed her cleaning cloth. Twas pretended to wipe the windowsill. The door swung open. "I thought I made it clear the boys aren't to be disturbed." "I was just cleaning the window doesn't need cleaning. It was done yesterday." Margaret moved between Rosa and the twins like a wall. "Perhaps you're not suited for this position." Rosa's pulse hammered. She couldn't lose this job. Not now. Not when she'd found proof something was wrong. "I apologize, Dr. Blackwell. It won't happen again." Margaret studied her, then smiled a smile that never reached her eyes. "See that it doesn't. The boys are fragile. Stimulation causes seizures. We wouldn't want you to harm them, would we?" "No, ma'am." "Good. Now leave. Medication time." Rosa gathered her supplies, but at the door she glanced back. Caleb was looking at her, not past her, not through her, at her. His eyes locked onto hers for 1 second before his head lolled back. She barely made it to the supply closet before her hands started shaking. That night, Rosa couldn't sleep. She lay in her staff quarters room staring at the ceiling, replaying it. Nathan's finger, Caleb's eyes, Margaret positioning herself like a guard. The warnings about stimulation and seizures that sounded less like medical advice and more like threats. Rosa thought about Miguel, about the doctor who'd given him the wrong dose, about how she'd trusted the white coat and the medical degree and her son had paid with his life, about how she'd promised herself kneeling at Miguel's grave that she'd never let it happen again, never let someone in power hurt a child while everyone looked away. At 2 a.m., Rosa made her decision. She got dressed, grabbed a flashlight, and crept through the dark mansion toward Margaret's study. She'd seen the doctor disappear into that room every evening with files locked away before night staff arrived. The study door was locked. Rosa found the spare key taped under the antique desk in the hallway. Classic, obvious. The hiding spot of someone who never imagined being questioned. Inside the study smelled like leather and old books and something chemical. Rosa closed the door and turned on her flashlight. Medical degrees covered the walls. Awards, photos of Margaret with politicians and celebrities. Behind the desk, a filing cabinet with the twins' names on labeled folders. Rosa's hands trembled as she opened the drawer. Medical records dating back 10 years. She pulled out the first file. Patient Caleb Blackwell, date March 15, 2015. Diagnosis, dates cortical visual impairment, selective mutism, developmental delay, treatment, daily administration of clonazepam 0.5 mg and risperidone 1 mg, quetiapine 25 mg. The medication list went on, and on. Drugs Rosa had never heard of. Dosages that made her stomach turn. She flipped to Nathan's file, identical. Every diagnosis the same, every treatment the same, for 10 years. Then she found Margaret's handwritten notes. Subjects continued to show resistance to behavioral conditioning, increasing dosage to ensure compliance. Father remains convinced of diagnoses, no intervention expected. Treatment protocols approved under private research license, progress satisfactory. Subjects, not grandsons, subjects. Rosa photographed every page with her phone hands shaking so badly she had to retake half the shots. She was putting the files back when she heard footsteps, coming closer. She killed the flashlight and dove behind the desk, pressing against the wall, heart thundering. The footsteps stopped outside the door. A shadow passed under the crack of light, then kept walking. Rosa waited 10 minutes before moving. When she crept back to her room, dawn was breaking. She'd been gone 3 hours. If anyone noticed, everything was over. But no one came. No one knocked. The mansion woke up like always, silent, controlled, perfect. Margaret emerged at 7 a.m. Ethan's car pulled out at 6:30. The twins were wheeled to the sunroom for morning therapy, another round of pills to keep them docile and empty. Rosa went through her cleaning routine, but everything had changed. Every time she passed the twins, she saw prisoners. Every time Margaret spoke, she heard a warden. Every time Ethan walked past his sons without looking, she saw a man who'd been lied to so long he'd stopped asking questions. That afternoon, Rosa made her second violation. She waited until Margaret left for a hospital board meeting. She went to the sunroom, locked the door. Caleb? Nathan? She knelt in front of them. I know you can hear me. I know you're in there. I saw the files. I know what she's doing. Nathan's breathing changed, faster, shallower. I'm going to help you, Rosa said, tears burning her eyes. I don't know how yet, but I promise I'm going to get you out. Can you hold on a little longer? Caleb's hand moved, just an inch, just enough to reach toward her. Rosa grabbed it and squeezed. I've got you, both of you, I swear. That was when she heard the car, Margaret's car, 2 hours early. Rosa's heart dropped. She unlocked the door and raced to the east wing with her cleaning cart. She'd just turned the corner when Margaret's voice echoed through the foyer. Where is the new girl? Upstairs, Dr. Blackwell, the butler said. Find her. Bring her to my study, now. Rosa barely had time to steady her breathing before the butler appeared. Dr. Blackwell would like to see you. This was it. She'd been caught. The photographs on her phone felt like they were burning through her pocket. If Margaret found them, it was over. Not just for Rosa, for Caleb and Nathan, too. Rosa followed the butler downstairs. The study door was open. Margaret sat behind her desk, hands folded. Close the door. Rosa did. Her legs felt like water. I've been reviewing the security footage. Margaret began, voice calm, pleasant. You were in this office last night. No point lying. Yes. Why? Rosa thought about Nathan's finger. Caleb's eyes, the word subjects in cold ink. She thought about Miguel, 8 years old, dead because she'd trusted a doctor. She made a choice that couldn't be unmade. Because those boys aren't blind. They aren't mute. They're drugged. And you know it. Silence. Long and terrible. Margaret's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Something dark and without mercy. "I see," she said softly. "And what do you intend to do with this revelation?" "Tell their father. Tell the police. Tell anyone who'll listen." Margaret stood, slowly walked to the window. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Softer. Almost sad. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Those boys were damaged from birth. Their mother, my daughter-in-law Elena, was an addict. Pills, alcohol, God knows what else. She was high when she went into labor. The twins were born 3 months premature, systems flooded with toxins. The developmental damage was catastrophic." Rosa said nothing. Let her talk. Let her spin the lie. "I've spent 10 years trying to give them quality of life," Margaret continued. "The medications stabilize them. Without them, they seize. They hurt themselves. They scream for hours." She turned back, eyes wet. "I'm saving them from suffering. And you want to take that away because of what a finger twitch, an eye movement. You're not a doctor. You're a maid." It was a good performance. Rosa almost believed it. Almost. "Then let me talk to Mr. Blackwell, Carl," Rosa said quietly. "Let him decide." Margaret's mask cracked. Just for a second. Just enough for Rosa to see the fury underneath. "My son trusts my judgment absolutely. He always has. If you go to him with these insane accusations, I'll have you arrested for theft, trespassing, endangering vulnerable children. I will destroy you. Do you understand? I will erase you." Rosa's phone felt heavy in her pocket. The photos, the proof, the only thing standing between those boys and another decade of chemical imprisonment. She could run now. Take the evidence to the police, to reporters. But Margaret would spin it. Would call her a disgruntled employee a liar. Would produce doctors and lawyers and files. No, Rosa needed something Margaret couldn't spin. Something undeniable. She needed the boys to wake up. "I resign," Rosa said suddenly. Margaret blinked. "What?" "Effective immediately. I'll be gone tonight." Rosa turned toward the door, gambling everything on walking away before they expected it. "Wait," Margaret's voice sharpened. "You'll sign an NDA. You'll never speak about anything you saw here. I'll compensate you for your silence." Rosa looked back. "How much? $20,000. Rosa thought fast. She needed money. She needed leverage. She needed time. "Make it 50. Bank transfer today." Margaret's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Fine. By 6 p.m., the paperwork will be ready in an hour." Rosa left the study, climbed to her room. She immediately called her daughter. "Maria, baby, I need you to listen. Something's happening. I can't explain yet, but I need you to know if anything happens to me, if I disappear or get arrested, there are photos on my phone. Cloud backup. Password is Miguel's birthday. You understand?" "Mama, you're scaring me. What's going on? Just promise me. Promise you'll look at those photos if anything happens." "I promise." "Mama, I love you, mija. I have to go." Rosa hung up, sat on her bed, thought about Miguel, about how she'd failed to save him, about Caleb and Nathan still alive, still there, still waiting for someone to see them. She wasn't going to fail again. At 5:30 p.m., Rosa signed the NDA with Margaret watching like a hawk. At 6 p.m., she checked her phone, $50,000 deposited in her account. At 6:15, she loaded her suitcase into her car. At 6:20, she drove through the Blackwell gates for what everyone believed was the last time. But Rosa didn't go home. She drove 3 towns over to a pharmacy and asked for the head pharmacist. She showed him the photos, the medication lists, the dosages, Margaret's notes. What would happen to these children if these medications were stopped suddenly? The pharmacist went pale. Whoever prescribed these should lose their license. These dosages for 10-year-olds, this is chemical sedation, heavy sedation. If stopped cold turkey, they'd go through withdrawal, dangerous withdrawal, sweating, shaking, possible seizures. But after a week, maybe 2. He looked up. They'd wake up. Their systems would clear. If there's no underlying damage, they'd wake up. And if someone wanted to prove these kids were being drugged against their will, you'd need blood work, independent testing, and you'd need the drugs stopped so their systems could clear enough to show cognitive function. He paused. Are these kids in danger? They've been in danger for 10 years. I'm trying to get them out. Rosa thanked him. Got back in her car. She sat there for 10 minutes staring at her phone. She'd signed an NDA, calling Ethan Blackwell could get her sued, arrested, destroyed. Margaret had the money, the lawyers, the power. But Rosa thought about Nathan's finger curling against her palm, about Caleb's eyes finding hers, about how Miguel would be 12 now if a doctor hadn't made a mistake, about how some promises mattered more than contracts. She pulled up the staff directory, found Ethan Blackwell's private cell, the number she wasn't supposed to have. Her hand shook as she dialed. He answered on the third ring. "Who is this, Mr. Blackwell, my name is Rosa Martinez. I was your maid until an hour ago. I need to tell you something about your sons that's going to sound impossible, but I'm begging you to listen." Silence. Then, "I'm listening." Rosa took a breath. "Your sons aren't blind. They aren't mute. They're being drugged. By your mother? I have proof. Medical files, medication logs, notes, where she calls them subjects instead of grandsons. I saw Nathan respond to touch. I saw Caleb track me with his eyes. They're in there, Mr. Blackwell. They've been in there the whole time." The silence stretched so long Rosa thought he'd hung up. Then Ethan's voice came back raw and broken and furious. "Where are you right now?" 20 minutes from your house." "Turn around. East Gate, 10 minutes. He paused. "And Rosa, if you're lying, if this is some kind of con, I'm not. I have a daughter. I lost a son to medical negligence 5 years ago. I know what it looks like when doctors use medicine as a weapon. I swore I'd never stay silent again." Her voice cracked. "Your boys are alive. They're just buried, and we can dig them out." The line went dead. Rosa turned the car around, heart-hammering, knowing everything was about to shatter. Inside the Blackwell estate, Margaret was preparing evening medications when her phone rang. Her son's name on the screen. She smiled. "Ethan, darling, how was your day?" "Cancel the boy's medication tonight." Her smile froze. "What? Why?" "Just do it. I'm coming home. We need to talk." He hung up. Margaret stood in her pristine study phone in hand, feeling her perfectly constructed world begin to crack. 20 minutes later, Ethan Blackwell walked through his front door with Rosa Martinez beside him. He looked like a man who'd been sleeping for 10 years and just woke up. His eyes were red. His hands shook. He went straight to the sunroom where his sons sat in their chairs. This time he really looked at them, not past them, not through them, at them. "Caleb," he whispered, kneeling. "Nathan, can you hear Daddy?" Nothing. Rosa stepped forward. "Try this." She pulled out her phone, played a recording she'd found online, a video from years ago, from when Elena was still alive. Elena Blackwell singing at some family party, her voice soft and sweet. Nathan's head turned. Toward the music, toward his dead mother's voice. Ethan's hands started shaking. "Oh God, oh my God, they can hear." "The medications," Rosa said quietly. "Stop the medications. Give them time. Their systems need to clear. They'll come back." Margaret appeared in the doorway. Her face, when she saw them, saw her son kneeling, saw Rosa standing there, saw her empire crumbling, was something Rosa would never forget. "Ethan," Margaret said carefully, "what is going on?" Ethan stood, looked at his mother. 10 years of trust died in his eyes. "What have you done to my sons? I don't know what this woman has told you, but she told me you've been drugging them, sedating them, keeping them locked in their own bodies for a decade." His voice was shaking. "She showed me files, medical records, notes where you call them subjects. Is it true?" Margaret's mask slipped. "Just for a second. You don't understand the situation. They were damaged. Are they blind?" "Silence. Answer me. Are my sons blind?" Margaret's hands clenched. The testing was inconclusive. The medications help manage. Are they blind, yes or no? It's more complicated than... Ethan moved so fast, Rosa flinched. He crossed the room, grabbed the silver tray with tonight's medications, and hurled it against the wall. Pills scattered across the floor, like tiny white lies finally exposed. "Get out," he said, voice deadly quiet. "Get out of my house. Get away from my children. If I ever see you near them again, I will destroy you the way you destroyed them. Do you understand me?" Margaret's face went white, then red. "I am your mother. I raised you. I saved this family after Elena died. You were broken, Ethan. You were drowning. Someone had to take control. You didn't take control. You took my sons. You stole 10 years of their lives. 10 years of my life." Tears ran down his face. "They were 6 months old, babies, and you turned them into experiments." "I was trying to help." "Get out," Ethan roared. "Get out before I call the police." Margaret looked at Rosa, eyes full of poison. This is your fault. You did this. Rosa met her gaze, didn't flinch. No, you did this. I just made sure someone finally saw it. Margaret grabbed her purse, walked to the door, stopped. You'll regret this, Ethan, both of you. When those boys seize, when they hurt themselves, when they scream, you'll beg me to come back, and I'll remember this moment. She left. The door closed. Silence filled the sunroom, but it was different now. Not the heavy, controlled silence of before. This was the silence of held breath, of possibility of a cage door swinging open. Ethan sank into a chair, head in his hands. What if she's right? What if stopping the medications hurts them? Rosa knelt beside him. I talked to a pharmacist, showed him everything. He said withdrawal will be hard. But after, if there's no real damage, they'll wake up. If your mother's been lying for 10 years, we won't know the truth until we try. Ethan looked at his sons, really looked. I can't believe I didn't see it. I can't believe I just accepted it. She's a doctor, your mother. You trusted her. That's what children do. Rosa's voice was gentle. But now you know, and now you can save them. Ethan nodded slowly, reached out and took Caleb's hand. I'm here now, buddy. Daddy's here, and I'm not going anywhere, I promise. Caleb's fingers twitched, just barely, just enough. Ethan looked at Rosa, tears streaming. How do I ever thank you? You don't. You just love those boys. You fight for them. That's all the thanks I need. That night, for the first time in 10 years, Caleb and Nathan Blackwell went to sleep without their evening medications. Their systems began the long, hard work of clearing, of waking up, of coming home. And in her staff quarters, Rosa Martinez lay awake thinking about Miguel, about how she couldn't save him, about how maybe, just maybe, she could save these two. She thought about her promise at Miguel's grave, about never staying silent again. She'd kept it. The first night without medications, nothing happened. Caleb and Nathan slept like they always did, drugged sleep-heavy and unnatural. Ethan sat between their beds, watching their chests rise and fall, terrified that any moment they'd start seizing like Margaret warned. Rosa checked on them every hour, feeling the weight of what she'd set in motion. By morning, the boys looked the same. Blank stares, limp bodies. Ethan's hope started cracking. What if it doesn't work? What if 10 years was too long? It's been 12 hours, Rosa said gently. The pharmacist said it could take days, maybe longer. How many days before I know I didn't just make everything worse? Rosa didn't have an answer for that. Margaret called 17 times that first day. Ethan blocked her number. She showed up at the gate at noon. Ethan had security turn her away. She sent her lawyer with a cease and desist letter by 3 p.m. threatening legal action for elder abuse and medical neglect. Ethan threw it in the trash. She's not going to stop, Rosa said, watching through the window as Margaret's car finally disappeared down the road. I know. Ethan looked exhausted. He hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, just sat with his sons waiting for a miracle that might never come. But I'm not giving her back access, not ever. Even if the boys never wake up, at least they'll be free of her. Day 2 brought the first signs of withdrawal. Nathan started sweating through his sheets. His body temperature spiked. Caleb's hands trembled. Both boys became restless, shifting in their beds, making small sounds, not words, just noises like animals waking from hibernation. Ethan called 3 different doctors. All of them said the same thing without knowing exactly what medications the boys had been on, and for how long they couldn't predict what withdrawal would look like. One suggested readmitting them to a hospital. Another recommended restarting a low dose of sedatives to ease the transition. The third, an older pediatrician who'd been practicing for 40 years, said something that made Ethan's blood run cold. Mr. Blackwell, if what you're telling me is true, your sons have been chemically restrained since infancy. Their neural development happened under sedation. We have no idea what's underneath. The kindest thing might be to let them stay comfortable rather than force them through this. Ethan hung up, looked at Rosa. He thinks I should put them back on the drugs. What do you think? I think I've been listening to doctors for 10 years and my sons are prisoners because of it. He ran his hands through his hair. But what if he's right? What if there's nothing underneath? What if I'm just torturing them for nothing? Rosa sat down beside him. You want to know what I think? I think that doctor never looked your sons in the eyes and saw them looking back. I did. You did. That's not nothing. That night, Nathan screamed. Not words, just sound raw and primal and terrified. He thrashed in his bed, eyes open, but unseeing body fighting something invisible. Ethan tried to hold him, tried to calm him, but Nathan's strength was shocking. For a boy who'd been limp and docile his whole life, he fought like he was drowning. Rosa called the pediatrician back. He's seizing, what do we do? Is he conscious? Are his eyes responsive? Rosa looked. Nathan was staring at the ceiling, rigid, shaking. I don't know. I don't think so. Put him on his side. Make sure his airway is clear. Time the episode. If it goes longer than 5 minutes, call an ambulance. 3 minutes. The longest 3 minutes of Rosa's life. Then Nathan went limp, gasping, soaked in sweat. His eyes closed. He fell into something that looked like sleep but felt like collapse. Ethan was shaking. That's it. I'm taking them to the hospital. This is too dangerous. Wait. Rosa grabbed his arm. Look at Caleb. Caleb was sitting up. Not upright, he couldn't manage that yet, but his head was lifted off the pillow. His eyes were open, and he was looking at his brother. Caleb. Ethan moved to his son's bedside. Caleb, can you hear me? Caleb's eyes shifted, found his father, held. Ethan started crying. Oh my God, you're there, you're actually there. Caleb's mouth moved. No sound came out, but his lips formed a shape, a word, the same word over and over. Ethan leaned closer, watching, trying to understand. What is it, buddy? What are you trying to say? Rosa saw it first. He's saying Nathan. He's asking about Nathan. Andy. Ethan looked at Caleb, then at Nathan's still form, then back at Caleb. Nathan's okay. He had a bad moment, but he's okay. You both are. You're waking up. Caleb's hand moved, reached toward his brother's bed. Ethan took it, guided it to Nathan's arm. The moment Caleb's fingers touched Nathan's skin, he relaxed. His eyes closed. He sank back into the pillow, but his hand stayed where it was, connected. They know each other, Rosa whispered. Even through all of it, they know. Day 3 was worse. Both boys went through cycles of sweating, shaking, and screaming. They vomited. Their temperatures spiked and dropped. Ethan and Rosa took turns staying with them, sleeping in shifts, forcing fluids, changing sheets, holding them through the worst of it. The house that had been silent for 10 years filled with the sounds of withdrawal, painful, ugly, necessary. Margaret tried to have them arrested. She filed a complaint with Child Protective Services claiming Ethan was denying his disabled son's necessary medical care. A social worker showed up on day 4, tired and skeptical, prepared to find exactly what Margaret described, a desperate father and a manipulative housekeeper torturing vulnerable children. Instead, she found Ethan sitting between 2 hospital beds he'd had brought into the master bedroom, holding Nathan's hand while Caleb slept. The boys looked rough, pale, thin, exhausted, but they were breathing. They were alive. And when the social worker asked Ethan to explain what was happening, he didn't defend himself. He just showed her the files Rosa had photographed. Every page, every note, every instance where Margaret had written subjects instead of grandsons. The social worker went pale. How long has this been happening? 10 years, Ethan said. My mother convinced me they were blind mute developmentally disabled. She said the medications were necessary. I believed her. I trusted her. And she used that trust to turn my sons into test subjects for God knows what. Where is Dr. Blackwell now? Banned from the property, she's been calling threatening, trying to regain access. I won't let her near them again. The social worker looked at the twins. Nathan was awake now, eyes open but unfocused tracking sounds but not yet processing. Caleb was still asleep, fingers still wrapped around his brother's arm. And their current condition, withdrawal. We stopped the medications 4 days ago. It's been hell. But they're waking up. Slowly, but they're coming back. Ethan's voice cracked. I know how this looks. I know you could take them from me right now, but I'm begging you, give me 2 more weeks. Just 2 weeks to prove they're in there. If nothing changes, if I'm wrong, you can do whatever you think is best. But please, let me try to bring my sons home. The social worker was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. This is Sarah Chen from CPS. I need an emergency medical evaluation at the Blackwell residence. Independent physician pediatric neurology if possible. No, not Dr. Margaret Blackwell. She's the subject of the complaint. We need someone with no prior connection to the family. She hung up, looked at Ethan. A doctor will be here in 2 hours. He'll examine the boys, review the records, and make a determination about whether this intervention is medically appropriate or constitutes neglect. If he says you're harming them, they go to the hospital immediately and you lose custody pending investigation. Understand? Yes. And Mr. Blackwell, if this turns out to be what I think it is, if your mother really did this, I'm going to make sure she never practices medicine again. The doctor who arrived was named James Park. He was young, maybe 35, with kind eyes and careful hands. He spent an hour examining the twins, checking their vitals, their reflexes, their responses to stimuli. He read through every file Rosa had photographed, his expression growing darker with each page. Finally, he sat down with Ethan and Rosa in the hallway outside the master bedroom. "I need to be very clear about something," Dr. Park said. "What was done to these boys is criminal. The medication regimen Dr. Blackwell had them on wasn't therapeutic, it was suppressive. She was essentially keeping them in a persistent vegetative state. The dosages alone could have caused permanent neurological damage." Ethan's face went white. "Could have? Does that mean they're damaged?" "I don't know yet. Their reflexes are present, but diminished. Their cognitive responses are emerging, but inconsistent. The fact that they're showing any awareness at all after 10 years of heavy sedation is remarkable. It suggests their underlying neural architecture is intact. But whether they'll fully recover, whether they'll be able to speak, walk, function independently, that's going to take time. Time to determine." He paused. "What you're doing, the withdrawal, is dangerous. They could seize, they could aspirate, they could code, but medically speaking, it's the right call. They can't recover while they're being actively sedated. You had to stop the drugs. So I can keep them home. With conditions. I want daily check-ins. I want blood work to monitor their systems. I want physical and occupational therapy starting as soon as they're stable enough. And if at any point their condition deteriorates beyond what we can manage here, they go to the hospital. No arguments. Done. Anything. Whatever they need." Dr. Park stood, shook Ethan's hand. "Your mother is going to fight this. She'll claim you're unstable, that you're being manipulated, that the boys need her care. You need to be prepared for that fight." "Let her come," Ethan said quietly. "I'm done being afraid of her." By day 7, the worst of the withdrawal had passed. The boys stopped screaming, their temperatures stabilized, they slept more peacefully, their bodies finally beginning to trust that the chemicals weren't coming back, and slowly, impossibly, they began to wake. Nathan first. He started tracking movement with his eyes. When Rosa walked into the room, his gaze followed her. When Ethan spoke, Nathan turned his head toward the sound. He couldn't speak yet. His throat was too damaged from years of disuse, his vocal cords atrophied, but he made sounds. Humming noises, attempts at communication. Caleb took longer. He'd always been the quieter twin, even in these early stages of waking. But on day 9, he reached up and touched Ethan's face. His fingers trembled against his father's cheek, exploring learning. Ethan held perfectly still, tears streaming, letting his son remember what it felt like to touch someone. To be touched back. "Hi, buddy," Ethan whispered. "I'm your dad. I know you don't remember me, but I remember you. I've always remembered you, and I'm so sorry I let this happen. I'm so sorry I didn't see." Caleb's hand dropped, but his eyes stayed on Ethan's face. Stayed there for a full minute before finally drifting closed again. Dr. Park came every day documenting progress, adjusting care plans. On day 12, he brought a speech therapist named Linda, who specialized in selective mutism and vocal rehabilitation. She sat with the boys for an hour, making sounds, encouraging them to mimic, celebrating every small noise they made. "Their vocal cords are weak but functional," she told Ethan afterward. "With therapy, they should be able to speak. It won't happen overnight. We're talking months, maybe years of work, but the capacity is there." "What about cognitively? Will they be able to understand language process information?" "Too early to tell, but Mr. Blackwell, they're responding to their names. They're making eye contact. They're showing preference for you over strangers. Those are huge indicators of cognitive function. Whatever damage was done, it's not total. Your sons are in there. We just have to help them find their way out." On day 14, Margaret filed a lawsuit. She was suing Ethan for wrongful removal of medical authority and suing Rosa for theft of medical records and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. The papers were delivered by a process server who looked deeply uncomfortable handing them over. Ethan read through the filing, his jaw tightening with every page. "She's claiming the boys are in danger, that I'm psychologically unstable, that Rosa manipulated me into turning against my own mother." He looked up. "She wants full custody reinstated. She wants them back." Rosa felt ice in her stomach. "Can she do that?" "She can try. Whether she'll succeed depends on what we can prove." Ethan pulled out his phone. "I need to call my lawyer. We're going to war." The lawyer's name was Patricia Reeves, and she'd handled Ethan's business contracts for years. She arrived at the mansion that evening and spent 3 hours reviewing everything: the medical files, the photographs, Dr. Park's evaluations, the social worker's report. When she finished, she looked at Ethan with something like awe. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases of medical abuse I've ever seen. Your mother didn't just overprescribe medication, she ran an unauthorized research protocol on incapacitated minors. If the state medical board sees this, she'll lose her license immediately. If a prosecutor sees this, she could face criminal charges." "Good," Ethan said flatly. "I want both. I want her license revoked, and I want her in prison." Patricia hesitated. There's a complication. Your mother is internationally respected. She has connections at every level of government and medicine. She'll bring in expert witnesses who'll testify that her treatment was appropriate, that you're misinterpreting the records, that the boy's improvement is coincidental or temporary. She'll make this fight as public and as ugly as possible. Let her. Ethan, she'll destroy your reputation, your business. She'll paint you as an unstable man who fell under the influence of a manipulative employee and abandoned his disabled son's medical care. She'll make Rosa out to be a con artist who stole medical records and convinced you to torture your own children. Rosa spoke up. She already is. The lawsuit says exactly that. Patricia nodded. Which means she's committed to this narrative, and juries, especially older juries, tend to be sympathetic to grandmothers who claim they're protecting vulnerable children. We need something irrefutable, something she can't spin. Like what? Like the boys recovering. If Caleb and Nathan can demonstrate cognitive function, if they can communicate, if they can show that they were aware and trapped all along, that's a smoking gun she can't explain away. But Mr. Blackwell, that could take months, maybe years. Are you prepared to fight that long? Ethan looked toward the master bedroom where his sons were sleeping. However long it takes, I'm not giving up on them again. The legal battle began immediately. Margaret filed for an emergency injunction to regain medical custody, claiming the boys were deteriorating without proper care. The hearing was set for 3 weeks out. 3 weeks to prove that Caleb and Nathan were improving, not declining. 3 weeks to show that freedom was better than sedation. Dr. Park doubled the therapy sessions. Physical therapy to help the boys regain muscle strength. Occupational therapy to relearn basic motor skills. Speech therapy to rebuild their ability to communicate. Every small victory was documented, photographed, recorded as evidence. On week 2, Nathan held a spoon. His hand shook and he dropped it 3 times, but on the 4th try, he managed to bring it to his mouth. The occupational therapist actually cheered. On week 3, Caleb rolled over by himself. It took him 10 minutes of trembling effort, but he did it. Moved his own body through space for the first time in a decade. On week 4, the day before the custody hearing, Nathan spoke. Not a full word, not yet, but a sound that was clearly, unmistakably intentional. He was looking at Rosa, and he made a sound that started with an R, then again, and again, trying to say her name. Rosa burst into tears. Ethan recorded it on his phone, his hands shaking so badly the video was almost unusable. Dr. Park called it a breakthrough. Linda, the speech therapist, called it a miracle. Patricia called it their best piece of evidence. The custody hearing took place in a courthouse downtown in a sterile room that smelled like floor polish and fear. Margaret arrived with 4 lawyers and 2 expert witnesses, neurologists, who'd reviewed the files and were prepared to testify that her treatment had been appropriate. She wore a gray suit and pearl earrings and looked like everybody's kind grandmother. She didn't look at Ethan, didn't acknowledge Rosa's existence. Ethan arrived with Patricia, Dr. Park, the social worker Sarah Chen, and a laptop full of videos showing the twins' progress. He looked exhausted. He'd lost 15 pounds in a month. His eyes were hollow from too many sleepless nights. But when the judge asked him to explain why he'd removed his sons from his mother's care, his voice was steady. Because she wasn't caring for them, Your Honor. She was imprisoning them, and I have proof. Patricia presented everything methodically, the medication records showing dosages far beyond therapeutic levels. Margaret's handwritten notes referring to the boys as subjects. The timeline showing how the drugs had been increased whenever the boys showed signs of awareness. Dr. Park's testimony about the neurological impact of long-term sedation. Sarah Chen's statement about what she'd found during her initial visit. Then they played the videos. Nathan tracking movement with his eyes. Caleb touching his father's face. Nathan trying to say Rosa's name. 30 days of progress condensed into 10 minutes of undeniable proof that these boys were not the empty vessels Margaret claimed they were. Margaret's lawyers objected, called the videos misleading, argued that involuntary muscle movements and random vocalizations weren't evidence of cognition, brought in their expert witnesses who testified that stopping the medications was reckless, that any apparent improvement was likely temporary, that the boys would regress without proper pharmaceutical management. Then Patricia did something brilliant. She requested permission to bring the twins to the courthouse. Margaret's lead attorney shot to his feet. Absolutely not. Those children are medically fragile. Transporting them would be dangerous and traumatic. This is a transparent attempt to manipulate the court's emotions. The children are the subject of this hearing, Patricia said calmly. The judge should be able to see them firsthand, rather than relying on competing expert opinions, unless opposing counsel is afraid of what the judge might observe. The judge considered. I'll allow it, but I want a medical professional present, and if at any point the children appear distressed, they'll be removed immediately. An hour later, Ethan wheeled Caleb and Nathan into the courtroom in their chairs. They were thin, pale, fragile-looking. Their heads still lolled slightly. Their movements were weak and uncoordinated. To anyone who didn't know what to look for, they appeared exactly as Margaret had always claimed, severely disabled, barely present. But then Margaret spoke. "Your Honor, as you can see, my grandsons require constant medical supervision. Without proper medication," Nathan's head turned toward her voice. His eyes opened, and for the first time in 10 years, Nathan Blackwell looked directly at his grandmother. His face, which had been blank and empty for so long, twisted into something unmistakable. Fear. He made a sound harsh, urgent, desperate. Not a word, but everyone in the courtroom heard what it meant. "No, stay away. Don't come near me." Caleb reacted instantly. His hand shot out, grabbed his brother's arm. Protective, calming. The two boys pressed together in their chairs, both staring at Margaret, with expressions that destroyed every lie she'd told. They knew her, they remembered, and they were terrified. The judge leaned forward. "Dr. Blackwell, approach the children, please." Margaret hesitated. Her lawyers whispered urgently. "Your Honor, I don't think I said approach them." Margaret stood, walked slowly toward the twins. With every step, Nathan's breathing got faster. Caleb's grip on his brother tightened. When she was 3 feet away, Nathan screamed the same raw primal sound from his first night of withdrawal. Caleb joined him, both boys crying out in wordless terror, trying to push their chairs backward, trying to escape. "That's enough," the judge's voice cut through the chaos. "Someone remove Dr. Blackwell from their vicinity immediately." Security escorted Margaret back to her table. The moment she was across the room, the boys quieted. Caleb was shaking. Nathan had tears running down his face, but they stopped screaming. The judge looked at Margaret with an expression that could have frozen steel. "Dr. Blackwell, those children are afraid of you, terrified of you. That's not a response to a loving grandmother. That's a trauma response." "Your Honor, they're confused. The medication withdrawal has left them disoriented. They knew exactly who you were, and their reaction was fear." The judge looked at the twins, then at Ethan, then back at Margaret. "I've seen enough. Medical custody remains with the father. Dr. Blackwell, you are to have no contact with the minor children pending further investigation. This court is also referring this matter to the State Medical Board and the District Attorney's Office for review of potential criminal conduct." She banged her gavel. "We're adjourned." Margaret's face went white, then red. She stood abruptly, knocking her chair backward. "This is a travesty. Those boys need me. Without proper treatment, they'll deteriorate. You're condemning them to suffering. Bailiff, escort Dr. Blackwell from the courtroom." As security led Margaret out, she twisted back toward Ethan. Her composure finally cracked completely. "You've destroyed this family. You've destroyed those boys. When they suffer, when they fail, it's on you. Do you hear me? It's on you." The doors closed behind her. Silence filled the courtroom. Ethan sank into a chair, head in his hands, shaking. Rosa moved to the twins, checking on them, calming them with soft words and gentle touches. Patricia gathered her files, looking satisfied but exhausted. The judge approached Ethan. "Mr. Blackwell, I want you to know what was done to your sons is one of the worst cases of medical abuse I've encountered. The fact that they're recovering at all is testament to their resilience and your determination. But the road ahead is long. They're going to need extensive support." "I know, Your Honor, whatever it takes." "Good, because I'm going to be monitoring this case personally. Dr. Park will submit monthly progress reports. Miss Chen will conduct home visits. And if I see any indication that the boys aren't thriving, we'll revisit custody arrangements. Understood?" "Yes, Your Honor. Thank you." She nodded, looked at the twins. "Those are brave boys you have there. Don't let them down again." "I won't. I promise." That night, back at the mansion, Ethan sat with his sons in their room. They were exhausted from the courthouse trip, barely able to keep their eyes open. But before they slept, Caleb did something that made Ethan's heart stop. He reached up and pressed his hand against Ethan's chest, over his heart, held it there. Then he moved the same hand to his own chest, to Nathan's chest, back to Ethan's. Understanding what his son was trying to communicate, Ethan whispered, "We're together now, the three of us. I'm not leaving again. I promise, buddy. We're together." Caleb's hand dropped, his eyes closed, and for the first time in a month, he slept without trembling, without nightmares, without fear. Rosa watched from the doorway, tears streaming down her face. She thought about Miguel, about how she couldn't save him, about these two boys who'd been saved because she refused to look away. She'd kept her promise. She'd never stayed silent, and 2 lives had been given back because of it. The medical board investigation began 3 days after the custody hearing. 2 investigators arrived at the mansion unannounced, carrying briefcases and recording devices and expressions that said they'd heard every excuse in the book. They wanted to see the boys. They wanted to see the medication logs. They wanted to interview everyone who'd been involved. Rosa told them everything, about Nathan's finger, about the files she'd found, about Margaret's threat to destroy her if she talked. She showed them the photographs on her phone, walking them through every page, every note, every instance where Margaret had treated her grandsons like lab specimens instead of human beings. The lead investigator was a woman named Dr. Susan Zhao, who'd been reviewing medical misconduct cases for 20 years. She sat across from Rosa in the study, the same study where Margaret had tried to buy her silence and asked the question Rosa had been dreading. "Miss Martinez, you signed a non-disclosure agreement. You accepted $50,000 in exchange for your silence. Yet here you are talking to us. Are you aware that makes you vulnerable to a lawsuit?" "Yes. And you're willing to risk that?" Rosa thought about Caleb's hand reaching for his brother, about Nathan trying to say her name, about the terror on their faces when Margaret walked toward them in that courtroom. Those boys were prisoners for 10 years because everyone who saw something stayed quiet. I'm not staying quiet. Sue me if you want. I'll tell the truth anyway. Dr. Zhao smiled, not a kind smile, a satisfied one. "Good, because Dr. Blackwell's lawyers have already threatened legal action against you, and I wanted to make sure you weren't going to back down under pressure." She pulled out a folder. "We've been looking into Margaret Blackwell's research history, the private protocols she mentioned in her notes. They were never approved by any ethics board. She was running unauthorized pharmaceutical trials on her own grandsons. That's not just medical misconduct. That's criminal. Can you prove it?" "With your testimony and these files." "Yes, but here's what I need you to understand. Margaret Blackwell has powerful friends, hospital administrators who owe her favors, politicians she's donated to, colleagues who'll defend her reputation because their own reputations are tied to hers. She's going to fight this investigation with everything she has, and she's going to come after you specifically because you're the one who exposed her. Let her come." "Miss Martinez, I don't think you appreciate how ruthless she can be. She'll dig into your background, your finances, your immigration status, if applicable. She'll find every mistake you've ever made and use it to discredit you. Are you prepared for that?" Rosa met her eyes. "My son died because I trusted a doctor who was careless with medication. I've spent 5 years wishing I'd asked more questions, demanded more answers, refused to just accept what I was told. These boys are alive because I finally did those things. So yes, I'm prepared. Whatever she throws at me, I can take it, because at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror." Dr. Zhao closed her folder. "Then let's make sure she never practices medicine again?" The investigation moved fast once it started. The medical board subpoenaed Margaret's research files, her hospital records, her financial statements. They interviewed colleagues, nurses, pharmacists, anyone who might have known what she was doing. And slowly, a pattern emerged that was even worse than Rosa had imagined. Margaret hadn't just experimented on Caleb and Nathan. She'd been conducting unauthorized research for over 15 years, using her position and reputation to access vulnerable patients, children with developmental disabilities, elderly patients with dementia, anyone whose consent couldn't be easily verified. The twins were just her most long-term subjects because they were family, because she had total access, because no one questioned a grandmother taking care of her disabled grandsons. When Ethan learned the full scope of what his mother had done, he locked himself in his office for 3 hours. When he came out, his eyes were red and his voice was hoarse. "How many—" Dr. Zhao hesitated. "We've identified at least 47 potential victims over the past 15 years. Some are deceased, some are still institutionalized, some were released to family care years ago, and we may never find them. 47 children. Children and adults, anyone she deemed an acceptable research subject." Dr. Zhao's voice was gentle but firm. "Mr. Blackwell, your mother is a sociopath. She's brilliant, charming, respected, and completely without empathy. She didn't see your sons as human beings. She saw them as opportunities, and she's been doing it for most of her career." Ethan sat down hard. "I brought her into their lives. After Elena died, I was a mess. I couldn't handle 2 infants on my own. Mom offered to help, and I handed them over. I trusted her completely. I never questioned anything she said. You were grieving. You were overwhelmed. She exploited that. This isn't your fault. Tell that to my sons? Tell that to the 47 other people she used." He looked at Dr. Zhao. "What happens now? The board revokes her license. The DA files criminal charges. She'll face multiple counts of medical fraud endangerment conducting unauthorized human trials. We're talking decades in prison if convicted. But Mr. Blackwell, she has money. She has connections. She'll hire the best defense team available. This case could take years to resolve. I don't care how long it takes. I want her held accountable. Good, because we need your sons to testify. Ethan's head snapped up. They can barely speak. How are they supposed to testify? Not now, but eventually. If they recover enough to communicate what happened to them, their testimony would be devastating to her defense. She can spin the medical records, claim therapeutic intent, argue that she was trying to help. But if Caleb and Nathan can stand in front of a jury and say, she knew we were aware and she drugged us anyway, that's something she can't explain away. That could be months, years. I know, but it's also the strongest case we'll ever have. So my question is, are you willing to put your sons through that when the time comes, to make them relive this trauma publicly so their grandmother can be held accountable? Ethan looked toward the master bedroom, where the twins were doing physical therapy with Dr. Park. He could hear Nathan making sounds, attempting words, getting frustrated, trying again. He could hear Caleb's quieter efforts, the shuffle of movement, as he tried to stand with support. Ask me again when they can answer for themselves, Ethan said finally. When they're well enough to understand what testimony means and what it costs, then they can decide. But I won't make that choice for George for them. I've made enough choices for them already. While the investigation consumed the adult world, the twins' recovery continued in small, miraculous increments. Nathan was the faster one, always reaching, always trying, always pushing his body to remember how to work. By week 6, he could sit up unassisted for 30 seconds. By week 8, he could hold a cup. By week 10, he spoke his first clear word. Dada. Ethan was changing Nathan's shirt when it happened. The word was slurred, the pronunciation off, but unmistakable. Ethan froze. What did you say? Nathan's face scrunched with effort. Da. Ethan grabbed his son's face between his hands, tears streaming. Yes, I'm Dada. I'm your dad. Oh my God, Nathan. Say it again. Dada. Clearer this time. More confident. Ethan pulled him into a hug, sobbing into his son's shoulder, 10 years of grief and guilt and desperate hope finally breaking through. I love you. I love you so much. I'm sorry I didn't see. I'm sorry I let her hurt you. But I see you now. I see you. Nathan's arms came up slowly, shakily, wrapped around his father, held on. Across the room, Caleb watched. He couldn't speak, yet his vocal cords were more damaged, his progress slower, but his eyes tracked everything. Later that night, after Nathan was asleep, Caleb reached for the alphabet board Linda had given him. He pointed to letters slowly, deliberately, while Ethan wrote them down. S-H-E-K-N-E-W. Ethan's hand froze. She knew? Who knew what, buddy? More pointing. W-E-W-E-R-E-T-H-E-R-E. Grandma knew you were there, that you were aware. Caleb's hand moved to yes on the board. The whole time, yes. Oh, Caleb. Ethan's voice broke. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Caleb pointed again. N-O-T-Y-O-U-R-F-A-U-L-T. It is my fault. I should have noticed. I should have asked more questions. H-E-R-F-A-U-L-T. Then after a pause, Y-O-U-H-E-R-E-N-O-W. Ethan pulled his son close, careful of his still fragile body. I'm here now. I'm here and I'm not leaving. Never again. By week 12, the district attorney filed formal charges. 8 counts of medical fraud, 12 counts of endangering the welfare of a child, 6 counts of conducting unauthorized human research, and 2 counts of falsifying medical records. The news broke nationally. Dr. Margaret Blackwell, renowned neurologist, best-selling author, frequent CNN expert, arrested and charged with systematically abusing vulnerable patients for over a decade. The media descended on the Blackwell estate like locusts. News vans lined the street. Reporters shouted questions at anyone who entered or left. Helicopters circled overhead trying to get footage. Ethan hired security to keep them off the property and installed blackout curtains so the boys wouldn't see the cameras. Margaret's mugshot went viral. In it, she looked nothing like the kind grandmother from the courtroom. She looked cold, furious, entitled. Someone created a hashtag medical monster that trended for 3 days. Victims from her past started coming forward telling stories of loved ones who'd been under her care and had mysteriously deteriorated instead of improved. The hospital where she'd worked for 30 years launched its own investigation and found record irregularities going back to the 1990s. Through it all, Margaret maintained her innocence. She gave an interview from her lawyer's office dressed in soft colors with perfect makeup, playing the role of wounded martyr. I dedicated my life to helping vulnerable patients. My grandsons were born severely disabled due to their mother's substance abuse during pregnancy. Everything I did was to ease their suffering and give them the best quality of life possible. This witch hunt is being driven by a disgruntled employee who stole confidential medical records and a son who's never forgiven me for the decisions I had to make after his wife died. Rosa watched the interview in the kitchen, rage building with every calculated lie. She's really gonna pretend she's the victim here. That's her only play, Patricia said. She'd been essentially living at the mansion for weeks, preparing for the criminal trial. She can't deny the medical records exist. She can't deny the boys are improving without her treatment. So she has to reframe the narrative, make herself the misunderstood hero and everyone else the villains. It might even work with some people. How can anyone believe her after seeing what those boys went through? Because most people didn't see it. They're seeing a respected doctor and a grandmother fighting for her family. The twins can't testify yet. The other victims are mostly deceased or unable to communicate. Without someone standing up and saying, "This is what she did to me specifically," it's just competing narratives. Rosa stood up. Then I'll do it. Do what? Give an interview. Tell my side. Show people what she really is. Patricia shook her head. Bad idea. Anything you say publicly can be used against you in her civil suit. You could give her ammunition. I don't care. She's out there lying about those boys, about Ethan, about me. Someone has to tell the truth. Rosa, I'm doing it, with or without your approval. The interview aired a week later on a major network morning show. Rosa sat across from the host, hands folded, voice steady, and told the whole story. Finding Nathan's finger movement, the files she'd stolen, the confrontation with Margaret, the $50,000 to stay quiet, breaking the NDA because some things mattered more than money. People are asking why you got involved, the host said. You were just the maid. You could have kept your head down, collected, your paycheck, moved on. Why risk everything? Rosa's eyes filled, but her voice stayed strong. Because I lost my son to medical negligence 5 years ago. A doctor prescribed the wrong dose of medication and Miguel died in his sleep. He was 8 years old. I trusted that doctor because he had credentials and confidence, and I didn't think I had the right to question him. My son paid for my silence with his life. She looked directly into the camera. When I saw what was happening to Caleb and Nathan, I knew I couldn't stay quiet again. I couldn't watch 2 more children be hurt by someone who was supposed to heal them. So yes, I stole those files. Yes, I broke the NDA. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat because those boys deserve to have someone see them, someone fight for them. And if that makes me a criminal in Dr. Blackwell's eyes, I can live with that. The interview went viral. Within hours, Rosa became the face of medical advocacy, the ordinary woman who stood up to power and saved 2 children. Support poured in from around the world. A legal defense fund was set up to help with Margaret's threatened lawsuit and raised $200,000 in 48 hours. Other former employees of Margaret's came forward with their own stories of suspicious medication orders and patients who declined under her care. But Margaret's supporters came out too. Medical colleagues who insisted she was being railroaded. Patients she genuinely helped over the years. Conservative pundits who framed it as an attack on accomplished women. The narrative war raged on every news channel, every social media platform, every think piece and hot take. Through all of it, Ethan kept the boys away from the noise. Their therapy continued. Their progress continued. And slowly and possibly, they began to reclaim their lives. Nathan learned to walk at week 16. Not well, his legs were weak, his balance poor, but he could take steps while holding onto furniture or a person's arm. The first time he walked from his bed to the bathroom, unassisted, Rosa cried so hard she had to sit down. Nathan looked at her confused by the tears and patted her head clumsily. "Oh, Kate, I'm okay, sweetheart. I'm so okay. You're walking. You're actually walking." A small smile crossed Nathan's face. Walk-ing. Caleb's progress was different, quieter. He still couldn't speak. Something about his vocal cords had been more permanently damaged, but Linda taught him sign language. He picked it up frighteningly fast, his hands flying through signs almost as quickly as someone who'd been using them for years. When Dr. Park asked how he was learning so quickly, Caleb signed, "Been watching, been learning, whole time, just couldn't show." "You've been aware this entire time, all 10 years?" "Yes." "What do you remember?" Caleb's hands moved slowly now, carefully. Everything, every word, every moment, every pill, trapped. Couldn't move, couldn't speak, could only watch and wait. Dr. Park looked sick. "I'm so sorry, I can't imagine." "Not your fault," Caleb signed. "Her fault, only her." At week 18, Margaret's lawyer reached out to Patricia with a settlement offer. If Ethan dropped his cooperation with the criminal investigation and agreed to supervised visitation with the boys, Margaret would drop the civil suits against him and Rosa. She'd also pay for all medical expenses and therapy for the twins going forward. Patricia brought the offer to Ethan. It's a substantial amount of money, and it would end the public battle. What does the DA say, Kyle? They can proceed without your cooperation, but your testimony and the boys' eventual testimony would strengthen the case significantly. Without you, it's tougher. Ethan didn't hesitate. No deal. She doesn't get to buy her way out of accountability, and she sure as hell doesn't get supervised visits with my sons. Tell her lawyer we'll see her in court. The rejection made national news. Margaret's team spun it as proof that Ethan was vindictive and unstable, more interested in destroying his mother than helping his sons. But then Caleb did something that changed the narrative completely. He recorded a video. Linda helped him setting up a camera. While Caleb sat in his wheelchair, he still couldn't walk unassisted with his hands ready to sign. The video was only 90 seconds long. No sound except Caleb's breathing. Just his hands moving through signs while subtitles appeared at the bottom of the screen. My name is Caleb Blackwell. I'm 10 years old. For the last 10 years, I've been trapped inside my own body while my grandmother gave me drugs that kept me frozen. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. But I could hear everything. I could understand everything. I knew I had a father. I knew I had a brother. I knew we were trapped and no one was coming to help us. Every day I tried to move. Tried to show someone I was there. But the drugs were too strong. Then Rosa came. Rosa saw us. Rosa saved us. Now I'm here. I'm awake. And I want everyone to know what my grandmother did wasn't medicine, it was torture. And she knew exactly what she was doing. She knew we were aware. She knew we were suffering, and she didn't care. Please don't let her hurt anyone else. Please make her stop. Ethan uploaded the video to YouTube. Within 6 hours, it had 5 million views. Within 24 hours, 20 million. News outlets played it on loop. Advocacy groups shared it. Celebrities reposted it. The image of a 10-year-old boy still visibly weak and recovering calmly, explaining how his own grandmother had imprisoned him for a decade, it was devastating. Undeniable. Margaret's support collapsed overnight. The colleagues who'd defended her went silent. The hospital released a statement condemning her actions. Her publisher pulled her books from stores. The medical organizations that had celebrated her career revoked her awards and memberships. She was finished. Not just professionally, socially, financially, completely. The woman who'd built an empire on her reputation watched it crumble in less than a week. Her lawyer called Patricia again. She wants to plead. To what? Everything, all charges, in exchange for a recommendation of leniency based on her age and her contributions to medicine. Patricia laughed. No, she goes to trial and takes her chances with a jury. After what those boys went through, after what Caleb just shared with the world, your client doesn't get to negotiate. She's 71 years old. A conviction means she'll die in prison. Good. Maybe she should have thought about that before she spent a decade torturing her own grandsons. The call ended. Margaret's team tried 2 more times to negotiate a plea deal. Each time, Ethan refused. He wanted a public trial. He wanted every detail exposed. He wanted the world to see exactly what his mother had done and exactly what price she'd pay for it. But before the trial could begin, something unexpected happened. Margaret tried to run. She was caught at a private airfield trying to board a charter flight to Switzerland. She'd withdrawn $2 million in cash, transferred another $5 million to offshore accounts, and had fake documents with a new identity. When the FBI arrested her, she fought like a trapped animal, screaming, clawing, completely losing the composed mask she'd worn for so long. The arrest was caught on cell phone video by someone at the airfield. The footage showed Margaret being dragged to a patrol car, makeup-smeared hair wild, shrieking about how she'd been right, how the boys were damaged and ungrateful, how she'd wasted years trying to fix them when she should have just institutionalized them and moved on. It was the final nail in her coffin. Any remaining sympathy evaporated. Here was the real Margaret Blackwell, not the kind grandmother or the dedicated doctor, but the narcissistic sociopath who saw other humans as tools or obstacles. She was denied bail. Flight risk, they said. Danger to potential witnesses. She'd sit in county jail until trial. When Ethan got the news, he sat down with his sons and told them, Grandma tried to leave the country, to run away so she wouldn't have to face what she did. But they caught her. She's in jail now. She can't hurt you anymore. Nathan signed good. He was learning sign language too, finding it easier than speaking while his vocal cords continued to heal. Caleb signed, will she come back? Not if I can help it. The trial is in 6 months. The prosecutor says with your video and everything else, there's no way she doesn't get convicted. She'll spend the rest of her life in prison. Good, Nathan signed again, but Caleb looked troubled. His hands moved slowly. Does that make us bad, that we want her punished? Ethan pulled both boys close. No, it makes you human. She hurt you. She stole years of your lives. Wanting her held accountable for that isn't bad. It's just... Will we have to see her at the trial? Not if you don't want to. You can testify via video. You never have to be in the same room with her again. Caleb nodded, leaned against his father, signed one more thing. Thank you for believing Rosa, for believing us. I should have believed you sooner. I should have seen... You see now, Caleb signed. That's what matters. You see us now. That night, the mansion was quiet. The news vans were finally gone. The reporters had moved on to other stories. For the first time in months, they had peace. Rosa found Ethan sitting in the garden staring at nothing. She sat beside him. You okay? I keep thinking about all the time I lost with them. 10 years. Their entire childhood. I'll never get that back. No. But you have now. You have tomorrow. You have all the years ahead. What if it's not enough? What if I can't make up for what I let happen? Rosa took his hand. You're not supposed to make up for it. You're supposed to move forward from it. Love them now. Fight for them now. Be present now. That's all they need. How did you get so wise? I lost a child. You get wise or you get destroyed. I chose wise. She squeezed his hand. Those boys love you, Ethan. They don't blame you. They blame her. And they're healing. That's what matters. Inside, Caleb and Nathan were watching a movie, something simple and bright and age-appropriate that they'd missed during their lost years. They sat together on the couch, Nathan's head on Caleb's shoulder, Caleb's arm around his brother. Connected, healing, free. And for the first time in 10 years, they looked like what they were children. Just children. Not subjects. Not prisoners. Not victims. Just two 10-year-old boys learning how to be alive. The hardest part wasn't the physical recovery. It wasn't the therapy sessions or the doctor's visits or even the media circus that continued to orbit their lives. Like vultures waiting for the next piece of trauma to consume. The hardest part was teaching Caleb and Nathan how to be children when they'd never had the chance to learn. At week 20, a child psychologist named Dr. Miriam Chen joined their team. She specialized in trauma recovery specifically in cases where children had been isolated or imprisoned for extended periods. She'd worked with kidnapping victims, abuse survivors, kids pulled from cults. But she told Ethan privately that she'd never seen anything quite like the twins. Most children I work with lost time, but they had a foundation first. They knew what normal felt like before it was taken away. Your sons never had that foundation. They went from infancy straight into chemical imprisonment. Everything they know about the world they learned while unable to interact with it. They're essentially feral in terms of socialization, but with the cognitive awareness of someone who's been observing human behavior for a decade without being able to participate. What does that mean for their recovery? It means they're going to surprise you constantly. They'll understand complex concepts but struggle with simple interactions. They'll have the emotional depth of someone who's suffered immensely, but the social skills of toddlers. And they're going to need intensive help learning how to be in the world instead of just watching it. She was right. Nathan could discuss the plot of movies he'd watched in perfect detail. He'd been observing everything for years, but he didn't know how to play. When Dr. Chen brought toys and suggested he try them, he just stared. She was confused. What do I do, Hulk? Whatever you want. There's no right way to play. But what's the purpose? Fun? Enjoyment. That's the purpose. Nathan looked at Caleb, who signed, I don't understand either. Dr. Chen's heart broke visibly. These boys had spent 10 years watching other children's shows, hearing other children laugh, seeing toys in their playroom that they could never touch. They'd observed childhood without experiencing it. Now free to finally play, they didn't know how. Okay, Dr. Chen said gently. Let's start simpler. What did you want to do during all those years you couldn't move? Caleb's hands moved immediately. Touch my brother. Know he was real and not just another thing I couldn't reach. And now you can, so touch him. That's play too. Connection is play. Caleb reached out and poked Nathan's shoulder. Nathan poked back, then Caleb poked again harder. Nathan laughed an unpracticed rusty sound and poked back harder. Within minutes, they were wrestling clumsily on the floor, all uncoordinated limbs and breathless laughter, finally doing what brothers should have been doing since they were babies. Ethan watched from the doorway, tears streaming down his face. Rosa stood beside him. They're going to be okay, she whispered. How do you know? Because they have each other, and they have you. That's more than most people get. But recovery wasn't linear. Some days were victories, other days were battlefields. At week 22, Nathan had his first panic attack. He was in the bathroom alone when something triggered a memory, maybe the smell of the medical soap they used to use, maybe just the enclosed space, and suddenly he was back in his chair, frozen, trapped, screaming without sound. When Rosa found him, he was curled on the floor, hyperventilating, signing frantically, "Can't move, can't move, can't move. Nathan, look at me. Look at my face. You can move. See?" She took his hand and placed it on his own leg. "Move your leg. Show yourself you can." He did shakily, then his other leg, his arms, his head, checking every part of himself to confirm he still had control. "I'm okay." "You're okay. You're safe. She's gone." "Promise?" "I promise, baby. She can't touch you anymore." He clung to Rosa for an hour, sobbing into her shoulder, releasing 10 years of terror he'd never been able to express. When Caleb found them, he didn't ask what happened. He just sat down on Nathan's other side and took his brother's hand. The three of them stayed like that until Nathan fell asleep, exhausted from the emotional storm. Dr. Chen explained it later to Ethan. Trauma responses. They'll come without warning, triggered by sensory memories. The boys were imprisoned for so long that their nervous systems are essentially rewired for captivity. Learning to feel safe in freedom is going to take time. How much time? Years, probably, maybe forever. Some things you don't fully recover from, you just learn to carry them differently. At week 24, Caleb started having nightmares. He'd wake up signing desperately into the dark, his hands moving through the words over and over, "Still here, still here, still here." Ethan started sleeping in the boys' room, ready to wake them when the dreams came. One night, Caleb woke screaming, the first sound he'd made since his vocal cords were too damaged, and Ethan rushed to his side. "I'm here, buddy. You're safe. It was just a dream." Caleb's hands shook as he signed. "Dreamed I was still frozen. That this was the dream. That I'd wake up and be back in the chair, and you'd be gone, and she'd be there, and it would never end. It ended. I promise you it ended. You're awake now. This is real." "How do I know?" Ethan thought for a moment, then took Caleb's hand and pressed it against his own face. "Feel me. I'm solid. I'm here." "In your dreams, you couldn't feel, could you? You were just watching, just trapped. But right now, you can feel my skin, my stubble, the tears on my face. That's how you know it's real." Caleb's fingers explored slowly his father's face, his own face, Nathan's sleeping form beside him, touching everything, confirming reality. Finally, he signed real. "Real," Ethan agreed. "And I'm going to say it every time you need to hear it. Every nightmare, every panic attack, every moment you're not sure, I'll tell you it's real. You're free, I promise." The trial date was set for October 15th, 6 months after Margaret's arrest. The prosecution had built an overwhelming case, medical records, witness testimony, financial evidence of the offshore research accounts she'd used to fund her unauthorized experiments. They had statements from 47 victims, or their families. They had Caleb's video, which had been viewed over 60 million times worldwide. They had everything except the one thing that would make it absolutely bulletproof: live testimony from the twins. The prosecutor, a fierce woman named Angela Torres, asked Ethan multiple times if the boys would be willing to testify. "I can work with the video, but if the defense puts on expert witnesses claiming the boys' improvements are exaggerated or coincidental, having them there in person showing the jury their recovery, answering questions, it would be devastating to the defense. They're 10 years old. They've been through enough." "I know, and I wouldn't ask if I didn't think it was important. Your mother's lawyers are going to argue that she was providing legitimate medical care, that the boys had genuine disabilities, that stopping her treatment was reckless. If Caleb and Nathan can demonstrate their cognitive abilities, their awareness, their memories of what was done to them, it destroys that defense completely." Ethan promised to discuss it with the boys and Dr. Chen. That night, he sat down with Caleb and Nathan and explained what the prosecutor was asking. "You don't have to do this. You've already done so much by making that video, but Miss Torres thinks having you there would help make sure Grandma can't hurt anyone else ever again." Nathan signed immediately, "I'll do it." Ethan was surprised. "Are you sure it means being in the same courtroom as her, answering questions about what happened? It'll be hard." "She needs to see us," Nathan signed. "Needs to see we're real. We're not subjects. We're people. And we won't be quiet anymore." Caleb was more hesitant. His hands moved slowly. "Will she be close to us?" "No, she'll be across the room. Security everywhere. She can't touch you." "Can Rosa come?" "Absolutely. Rosa, me, Dr. Chen, anyone you want." Caleb nodded, signed, Okay, I'll do it too, for the other kids she hurt, the ones who can't speak. When Ethan told Angela Torres the boys agreed, she actually hugged him. Thank you, this is going to change everything. Just promise me you'll protect them. No surprises, no ambushes. If it gets too hard, we stop. You have my word. The preparation took weeks. Dr. Chen worked with the boys on what to expect the courtroom layout. The types of questions they'd be asked, how to handle nervousness. Patricia coached them on testifying, on speaking clearly, on not letting the defense attorneys intimidate them. Rosa just held them when it got overwhelming and reminded them they were brave. Nathan's speaking had improved dramatically. He still struggled with certain sounds, still had to concentrate hard on forming words, but he could communicate verbally now. Caleb remained primarily nonverbal. His vocal cords had been too damaged, but he'd become so fluent in sign language that an interpreter would be present to translate for the jury. One evening, about 3 weeks before the trial, Rosa found Nathan in the library looking at photo albums. Pictures of Ethan and Elena before the twins were born. The wedding, the pregnancy announcement, Elena's baby shower. Then nothing. No pictures of the boys as infants, no first steps, first words, first birthdays, just a gap where their childhood should have been. You okay, sweetheart? Nathan touched a photo of Elena. Is this my mom? Yes, that's your mother. I don't remember her. You were very young when she died, just 6 months old. Grandma said she was bad, said she took drugs and hurt us before we were born, said that's why we were broken. Nathan looked up at Rosa. Was that true? Rosa sat down beside him. This was a conversation she'd been dreading, but lying wouldn't help. Your mother struggled with addiction. That part is true, but she loved you both very much, and after you were born, she got clean. She was trying so hard to be the mother you deserved. Then why did she die? An accident. She fell down the stairs. Your father found her and called an ambulance, but it was too late. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Then, do you think she'd be proud of us for fighting back, for getting free? Rosa's throat tightened. I think she'd be so proud she'd burst. You boys are survivors. You're warriors. Your mother would love the men you're becoming. We're not men. We're 10. You're 10-year-olds who've lived through things most adults couldn't survive. That makes you warriors in my book. Nathan smiled slightly, closed the album. Rosa, if we didn't have Dad and we didn't have each other, would you keep us... what do you mean? If we were alone, would you take care of us, or would we be too much trouble? Rosa pulled him into a fierce hug. Nathan Blackwell, you listen to me. You and Caleb could never be too much trouble. If you needed me, I'd move heaven and earth to keep you safe. You understand, you're not a burden, you're not broken. You're children who deserved better than what you got, and any adult who can't see your worth isn't looking hard enough. Nathan clung to her. I'm glad you looked. I'm glad you saw us. Me too, baby. Me too. The day before the trial, Margaret's defense team made one final attempt to stop the boys from testifying. They filed an emergency motion claiming that forcing traumatized minors to face their alleged abuser in court constituted cruel and unusual punishment. They brought in a psychologist who testified that the emotional damage of testifying would outweigh any therapeutic benefit. They argued that the boys' recovered memories couldn't be trusted, that they might have been coached, that their testimony would be unreliable. The judge shut it down in under 10 minutes. The defense has spent months claiming these boys are severely disabled, incapable of complex thought or reliable communication. Now you're arguing they're competent enough to be traumatized by testifying. You can't have it both ways. The boys will testify. Motion denied. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about everything that could go wrong. What if the boys froze on the stand? What if seeing Margaret triggered panic attacks? What if the defense attorneys were cruel in their cross-examination? What if he was making a terrible mistake by allowing this? He was sitting in the dark kitchen at 2 a.m. when Rosa found him. Can't sleep either. I keep second-guessing everything. Maybe the video is enough. Maybe I'm pushing them too hard. Did they say they wanted to do this? Yes, but they're children. They don't fully understand what they're agreeing to. They understand better than you think. They lived through it, Ethan. This is their story to tell. Rosa poured herself coffee and sat across from him. You want to know what Nathan told me tonight? He said testifying was the first time in his life he'd get to speak for himself. Get to control his own narrative instead of being a silent subject in someone else's story. That's not a child being pushed. That's a survivor taking his power back. What if Margaret's lawyers destroy them? Then we'll be there to put them back together, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think those boys are going to walk into that courtroom and show the world exactly who they are, and your mother won't have any lies left to hide behind. The trial began at 9 a.m. on a cold October morning. The courthouse was surrounded by protesters, some supporting Margaret, claiming she was being persecuted for difficult medical decisions but far more demanding justice for her victims. Signs read, "Medicine is not torture," and "Believe the children," and "Lock her up." News crews from 17 countries broadcast live. Inside the courtroom was packed with journalists, advocates, families of other victims, and curious observers who'd followed the case obsessively. Margaret sat at the defense table in a conservative navy suit, her hair perfectly styled, her expression serene. She looked like everyone's favorite grandmother again, soft, gentle, and capable of harm. Her legal team had clearly coached her on presentation. Ethan sat in the front row with Patricia, Dr. Chen, and Rosa. The twins were in a private room down the hall, waiting for their turn to testify. They'd be called on day 3 of the trial after the prosecution established the medical evidence and expert testimony. Angela Torres opened with a statement that silenced the courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about power. The power a doctor has over a patient, the power an adult has over a child, the power a grandmother has over her grandsons. Dr. Brr." Margaret Blackwell used all of that power to turn 2 helpless infants into research subjects for her unauthorized experiments. For 10 years, she chemically imprisoned them knowing they were aware, knowing they were suffering, and she did it anyway because she could, because no one was watching, because she believed she was untouchable. Over the next 2 weeks, we're going to show you exactly what she did. And when you hear from those boys, when you see them walk and speak and tell you in their own words what it felt like to be trapped in their own bodies, while their grandmother administered drugs that kept them frozen, you're going to understand that this wasn't medicine. This was torture. And Dr. Blackwell knew exactly what she was doing. The defense attorney, a silver-haired man named Richard Moss, countered with sympathy and misdirection. Dr. Blackwell dedicated her life to helping the most vulnerable patients. She took in her grandsons after a tragedy after their mother's death left them with severe disabilities from prenatal drug exposure. She provided them with cutting-edge care, with stability, with love. Yes, she used strong medications because those boys had severe neurological issues that required pharmaceutical management. The prosecution wants you to believe she's a monster, but the evidence will show she's a grandmother who made difficult medical decisions to give her grandsons the best life possible. And when an employee with a grudge stole confidential files and convinced Dr. Blackwell's grieving son to turn against her, this family was torn apart. This isn't a case about abuse. It's a case about tragedy, misunderstanding, and a media circus that's turned a devoted grandmother into a villain. Day 1 was medical testimony. Expert after expert explained the medications Margaret had prescribed, the dosages, the effects on developing brains. A pharmacologist testified that the combination of drugs would cause profound sedation, bordering on chemical coma. A pediatric neurologist stated that prescribing such medications to infants without documented evidence of the conditions being treated was medically indefensible. Day 2 brought the other victims. An elderly woman whose mother had been under Margaret's care testified that her mother had deteriorated rapidly under Dr. Blackwell's treatment, becoming nonverbal and bedridden within months of starting a new medication regimen. After her mother's death, when the family requested medical records, they found evidence of unauthorized medication trials. A father whose autistic son had been Margaret's patient for 2 years described how his previously communicative child became increasingly withdrawn and docile under her care. When they switched doctors, the new physician was horrified by the medication list and immediately began weaning the child off. Within months, the boy was communicative again, story after story, victim after victim, a pattern so clear it was damning. Margaret showed no emotion, just sat there occasionally whispering to her lawyers, maintaining that grandmother mask. Day 3 arrived. The boys' day. Ethan woke them early, helped them dress in the clothes Patricia had picked out, simple, age-appropriate nothing that looked coached or performative. Just 2 boys in jeans and button-down shirts. "You ready?" Ethan asked. Nathan nodded. Caleb signed yes, though his hands shook. "Remember, if it gets too hard, we stop. You don't have to prove anything to anyone." "Yes, we do," Nathan said quietly. "We have to prove we're real, that we matter, that what she did was wrong." He looked at his father. "You believe us, right? That we were there the whole time?" "I believe you. I believe you more than anything." "Then let's go make everyone else believe us too." They arrived at the courthouse through a private entrance to avoid the cameras. Rosa held Caleb's hand. Ethan held Nathan's. Dr. Chen walked with them, providing steady reassurance. When they reached the private room outside the courtroom, Angela Torres was waiting. "Okay, boys. Nathan, you're up first. I'm going to ask you questions about what you remember. Take your time with answers. If you need a break, just say so. The judge knows you're young and you've been through trauma. She's not going to let anyone push you too hard." Nathan squared his shoulders. I'm ready. They walked into the courtroom and every head turned. The gallery had been cleared of media-only family members of victims, and essential court personnel were allowed for the minors' testimony. But the weight of attention was still massive. Nathan walked to the witness stand on his own, though his gait was unsteady. He was sworn in his hand on the Bible, his voice small but clear. I do. Angela approached gently. Nathan, can you tell the jury how old you are? 10. And do you know why you're here today? To tell the truth about what happened to me and Caleb. That's right. Now I know this is hard, but I need you to tell us what you remember from when you were younger. Do you remember being in a wheelchair? Yes? Can you tell us what that was like? Nathan's hands gripped the edge of the witness stand. I couldn't move, couldn't talk, couldn't do anything except sit there and listen and watch. Everyone thought I was blind and deaf and didn't understand anything, but I understood everything. I was just trapped. How long were you trapped like that? My whole life until Rosa came. And during those years, do you remember receiving medication every day, 4 times a day? Grandma gave it to us. Did you want to take the medication? Nathan's voice cracked. No, but I couldn't say no, couldn't fight, couldn't do anything. She'd come with the silver tray and the pills, and she'd put them in my mouth and make me swallow, and I'd feel everything get fuzzy and heavy and far away. And I'd try so hard to stay present, to stay aware, but the drugs were too strong. It was like drowning over and over and never getting to come up for air. Several jury members were crying. Margaret stared at Nathan with an expression of cold fury. Nathan, did your grandmother ever say anything while she was giving you the medication, anything you remember? She used to say, this is for your own good, or you'll thank me someday, but sometimes when no one else was there, she'd say other things. Like what? Nathan looked directly at Margaret. She'd say, stay quiet, stay still, be good little subjects. She called us subjects, not grandsons, subjects. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge called for order. Angela continued. Nathan, when did you realize you were going to be free? When Rosa stopped coming to clean and Dad came home early, and they stood in our room arguing with Grandma. Rosa said we weren't blind. Dad said he believed her, and Grandma looked scared. That was the first time I'd ever seen her scared, and I knew maybe someone finally saw us. And when the medication stopped, what happened? It hurt. I was sick and scared, and everything was too loud and too bright because I'd never really experienced anything without the drugs making it fuzzy. But then things got clearer, and I could move my fingers, then my hand, then my arm, and I realized I was waking up. After 10 years of being asleep while awake, I was finally actually waking up. Angela let that sit with the jury. Then, one more question, Nathan. You said you understood everything during those years. Do you believe your grandmother knew you were aware? Yes. How do you know? Because once when I was maybe 7, I managed to move my hand, just a tiny bit. Just my pinky finger, but she saw it. I know she saw it because she leaned in close and whispered, I know you're in there, but nobody else will ever believe it, so be a good boy and stay quiet. Then she increased my medication that night. I didn't move again for 3 years. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of people crying. Angela nodded. Thank you, Nathan, you're very brave. The defense attorney stood for cross-examination. He smiled kindly at Nathan. Hi, Nathan. My name is Mr. Moss. I just have a few questions for you. Okay. You said you remember everything from when you were very young. Even when you were an infant, correct? Yes. That's unusual, isn't it? Most people don't remember being babies. Most people aren't drugged and trapped. I remember because I had nothing else to do except remember. I lived in my head for 10 years. I see. And you said your grandmother was mean to you, that she hurt you on purpose. She did. But isn't it possible she was trying to help, that she thought the medication was making you comfortable? Nathan's eyes hardened. Something in his expression shifted from frightened child to someone much older, someone who'd seen too much. Sir, my grandmother's a neurologist, one of the best in the world. She knows what those drugs do. She knows how to test for awareness. She could have run scans, done evaluations, tried, reducing dosages to see if we responded. She did none of that. Instead, every time we showed any sign of awareness, she increased the drugs. That's not medicine, that's imprisonment, and she knew exactly what she was doing. Mr. Moss had no response. He returned to his table. No further questions. Nathan was dismissed. As he passed his grandmother's table, he stopped, looked her directly in the eyes. and signed slowly, deliberately, so the interpreter and everyone watching could understand, "I forgive you, but I'll never forget, and I'll make sure no one else forgets either." Then he walked out of the courtroom, took Rosa's hand, and started crying. "I did it. I actually did it." "You did, baby. You were so brave, so strong. I'm so proud of you." Caleb was next. He walked to the stand with visible trembling, but his face was set with determination. Because he couldn't speak, the interpreter stood beside him, translating his signs for the jury. Angela's questions for Caleb were similar, but Caleb's answers were different, quieter, more introspective. He talked about what it felt like to watch Nathan suffer and not be able to comfort him, about hearing their father cry in other rooms and not being able to tell him they were alive, about the desperate hope every time someone new entered their lives that maybe this person would see them. And then Rosa came, Caleb signed, and she looked at me differently, like she was actually seeing me instead of looking through me. And when she touched Nathan's hand and he responded, I wanted to scream with joy, but I couldn't make sound. So I just looked at her. I looked as hard as I could, trying to make her see me too, and she did. She saw both of us, and she didn't look away. When asked about his grandmother, Caleb's hands moved slowly, deliberately. I don't know if she's evil or broken, or just so convinced she's right that she can't see the harm she causes, but I know she knew. She knew we were aware. She knew we were suffering, and she chose her research over our freedom. That's not something you do to people you love. That's something you do to things, and she saw us as things. The cross-examination tried to shake him, tried to suggest his memories were false, that the medications had been necessary, that his current abilities were evidence of effective treatment rather than recovery from abuse. Caleb responded to each question with calm clarity, his hands moving through signs with devastating precision. When asked if he loved his grandmother, Caleb paused, then signed, I don't know if I ever really knew her enough to love her. I knew the woman who kept me prisoner. I knew the doctor who saw me as a subject. But my grandmother, the person she could have been if she'd chosen love over control, I never met her, so I can't tell you if I love someone I never actually knew. It was the perfect answer, sympathetic but damning, acknowledging complexity while refusing to excuse cruelty. When both boys were finished, when they'd walked out of that courtroom having spoken their truth, after a decade of forced silence, Ethan held them while they cried, and told them over and over that he was proud that they were brave, that it was over now. In the courtroom, Margaret sat motionless, her mask finally cracking. For the first time since the trial began, she looked small, defeated, exposed. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous on all counts. Guilty. Margaret Blackwell was sentenced to 35 years in prison with no possibility of parole. At 71 years old, it was a life sentence. Her medical license was permanently revoked. Her assets were frozen pending civil suits from her victims. The hospital where she'd worked for 3 decades removed her name from the research wing and issued a formal apology to everyone she'd harmed. When the verdict was read, Margaret showed no emotion, just stood there rigid and silent as the bailiff led her away. She never looked at Ethan, never looked at the boys, just stared straight ahead as if refusing to acknowledge any of it was real. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by reporters and cameras, and the chaos of justice finally served, Ethan held his sons close. It's over? He whispered. It's finally over. Nathan signed, no, it's not over. It's just beginning. Twice. What do you mean? This was the ending of the bad story. Now we get to write a new one. One where we're free and alive and here. That story's just starting. And watching from behind them, Rosa smiled through her tears, because that's exactly what she'd been fighting for all along. Not just an ending to the nightmare, but a beginning to everything that came after. The first month after the trial felt like learning to breathe underwater. Everything was different, yet the trauma still lived in their bodies, in their reflexes, in the way Caleb flinched when someone approached too quickly, or how Nathan checked and rechecked that doors were unlocked before he'd enter a room. Freedom wasn't a switch that flipped. It was something they had to practice, had to choose, had to earn back piece by piece. Dr. Chen warned them about this. The hardest part of recovery is realizing that surviving the trauma doesn't mean you're done with it. It means you're finally safe enough to feel everything you couldn't feel while you were just trying to stay alive. She was right. Nathan started having violent nightmares where he'd wake up swinging fighting invisible restraints, screaming words he couldn't say for 10 years. Ethan would rush in and hold him, rock him, remind him where he was until the terror passed. Sometimes it took minutes, sometimes hours. Caleb's trauma came out differently. He'd go silent for days, retreating so far inside himself that even Nathan couldn't reach him. He'd sit by the window staring out at the garden, hands still face empty, and for terrible moments, he looked exactly like he had in the chair. Like he'd never woken up at all. The first time it happened, Rosa panicked. "Caleb, sweetheart, talk to me. Sign to me. Something." Nothing. Just that empty stare. Dr. Chen came immediately. She sat with Caleb for 2 hours, not talking, not pushing, just being present. Finally, his hands moved. Sometimes I forget I'm allowed to exist. I go back to that place in my head where I lived for so long, where I was safe because I wasn't really there, and it's hard to come back. What helps you come back? Nathan, Dad, Rosa, knowing they're real, knowing I'm real, but sometimes I need time to remember how to be a person instead of just a witness. They learned his triggers, medical facilities, certain chemical smells, the color of the pills Margaret had used, small white circles that made Caleb's hands shake if he saw them anywhere. They learned Nathan's too, being touched without warning, doors closing suddenly, anyone standing over him while he was sitting. Small things that to anyone else meant nothing but to the boys meant prison. The mansion that had been so silent for so long slowly filled with life. Real life. Messy, loud, imperfect life. Ethan converted the old playroom, the one with the unopened toys, into a proper space for kids. He hired a decorator who specialized in therapeutic environments and told her, make it feel like childhood, like joy, like everything they missed. When it was finished, Rosa brought the boys to see it. The room was bright with primary colors filled with art supplies and building blocks and a reading corner with bean bags and books at every reading level. There were sensory toys for when things got overwhelming and a punching bag for when Nathan needed to hit something that wouldn't break. There was a keyboard because Caleb had shown interest in music and a chess set because Nathan had taught himself the game by watching YouTube videos during his trapped years. "This is ours," Nathan asked, voice small. "All yours?" Ethan said. "You want to change anything, we change it. You want to add something, we add it. This is your space, your choice, always." Caleb walked to the keyboard and pressed a key. The sound filled the room. He pressed another. Then his hands moved across the keys in a simple melody, something he'd heard years ago and held in his memory, waiting for the chance to recreate it. Nathan started crying. "We get to do things now. We actually get to do things." "Yeah, buddy, you do whatever you want." "I want to go outside. Can we go outside? Not just to therapy or the doctor. Can we just go outside because we want to?" Ethan's throat tightened. "Right now, we can go right now." They went to the garden first. The boys had been outside for therapy sessions, but always supervised, always structured. This was different. This was just being. Nathan ran clumsy and uncoordinated, but running across the grass. He fell twice and laughed both times. Caleb moved more carefully, touching plants, feeling textures, experiencing the world through sensation instead of just observation. Rosa watched from the patio, tears streaming. Ethan stood beside her. "They're going to be okay, aren't they?" "I think so. Not today. Not tomorrow, but someday, yeah, they're going to be okay." That night, Ethan made dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and marinara, but he made the boys help. Taught Nathan how to stir the sauce. Showed Caleb how to set the table. Normal things. Family thing. Things they should have been doing all along. They ate together, actually talking, laughing, which was fine when Nathan got sauce on his shirt and Caleb signed that he looked like he'd been attacked by a tomato. It was ordinary and perfect, and everything the Blackwell mansion had never been. After dinner, Nathan asked the question Ethan had been dreading. "Dad, what happened to Mom? The real story, not what Grandma said." Ethan took a breath. He'd prepared for this conversation with Dr. Chen's help. "Your mother struggled with addiction before you were born. Pills, mostly. She'd been in pain from an injury and the medication became a problem. When she found out she was pregnant, she got clean. Went to rehab, did the work, got sober. She was clean your entire pregnancy and after you were born." "Then why did Grandma say she was using when we were born?" "Because your mother had a seizure disorder from an old head injury. She took medication for it, legal prescribed, necessary medication, but your grandmother used that to claim she was still using drugs. She twisted the truth to make your mother look like an addict who damaged you. It was a lie, but it was a convenient lie that let her justify what she did to you." Caleb's hands moved. "How did Mom die?" "She fell down the stairs. It was late at night. I was at the office. The nanny heard the crash and found her. They think she had a seizure and lost her balance. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was gone." "Do you think Grandma pushed her?" The question hung in the air like poison. Ethan wanted to say no. wanted to believe his mother was many terrible things but not a murderer, but he'd seen what she was capable of. He'd watched her drug her own grandsons for a decade without remorse. Could someone who'd do that also push their daughter-in-law down the stairs? I don't know, Ethan said honestly. The police investigated and ruled it an accident, but I don't know, and I'll probably never know for sure. Nathan absorbed this. If she did, if Grandma killed Mom, then she took everything from us. Our mom, our childhood, our chance to be normal, everything. Yes. And we're just supposed to move on, be okay. No, you're supposed to feel everything. Be angry, be sad, be furious. And then when you're ready, you're supposed to build a life anyway. Not because she deserves your forgiveness or your peace, but because you deserve to live. Really live. That's the best revenge there is. Caleb signed, I want to meet her. Mom, I mean, even though she's gone. What do you mean? I want to see her grave, talk to her, tell her we're okay, that we survived. Maybe she can hear us, maybe she can't, but I want to try. Ethan hadn't visited Elena's grave since the funeral. He'd been too broken, too guilty, too lost in his own grief to face it. But for his sons, he'd do anything. Okay, we'll go tomorrow. Elena Blackwell was buried in a cemetery 40 minutes from the estate. Her grave was simple, a flat marker with her name dates and the words beloved wife and mother. Ethan had chosen it in a fog of grief, barely able to function, while Margaret handled everything else. Now standing here with his sons, he realized how inadequate it was, how little it said about who she'd been. She deserves better than this, Ethan said quietly. Tell us about her, Nathan said. Everything you remember. So Ethan did. He told them how Elena laughed loud and unrestrained and completely unself-conscious. How she sang off-key but didn't care. How she'd wanted to be a teacher but ended up in marketing because it paid better, but she still volunteered at literacy programs every weekend. How she'd cried with joy when she found out she was having twins. How she'd painted their nursery herself, every wall a different soft color, singing to her belly the whole time. She loved you before she ever met you, Ethan said. She used to talk to you while you were still inside her, tell you stories, play music. She'd say, my boys are going to change the world. She believed that. She believed in you. Caleb knelt by the grave and placed his hand on the marker. Signed, Hi Mom, I'm Caleb. This is Nathan. We're 10 now. I wish you could have seen us grow up, but we're here now. We're alive. We're free, and we're trying to be the kind of people you'd be proud of. Nathan sat beside his brother. I don't remember you, but I wish I did. Dad says you were strong, that you fought to get clean, that you loved us. I believe him, and I'm going to try to be strong like you were, to fight like you did. Thank you for that, for showing us how even before we could understand. Ethan joined them, the three of them kneeling there together. Elena, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't protect them. I'm sorry I let her take control. I'm sorry I failed you. But I'm trying now, I'm fighting now, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure our boys know they're loved, that they matter, that they were worth everything. They stayed for an hour. Rosa waited by the car, giving them space, giving them time. When they finally returned, Nathan's face was set with new determination. I want to do something. What kind of something? Something that helps other kids. Kids like us who are trapped and can't speak. I want to make sure someone's always watching, always listening, always ready to see what others miss. That's a big goal. We've got time, and we've got a reason. That's more than most people start with. The idea grew. Over the following weeks, with Dr. Chen's guidance and Patricia's legal help, they began forming a foundation, the Elena Blackwell Foundation for Children's Medical Advocacy. Its mission to provide oversight and support for children with complex medical needs, to train healthcare workers to recognize signs of abuse disguised as treatment, and to fund research into recovery from medical trauma. They were 10 years old. They could barely handle their own recovery, but they were determined to turn their suffering into something that might save someone else. Ethan tried to slow them down. Guys, you don't have to do this now. You can just be kids for a while. We were never just kids, Nathan said. We went from babies to prisoners to survivors. We skipped the kid part. Maybe we can't get it back, but we can make sure other kids don't lose it in the first place. Caleb signed, besides helping others helps us. It makes what happened to us matter. It gives it purpose. Dr. Chen agreed. Purpose is powerful in trauma recovery. If they want to channel their experience into advocacy, it could be incredibly healing. We just need to make sure they're not sacrificing their own well-being in the process. The foundation launched quietly. No press conference, no media circus. Just a website, a mission statement, and a phone line for reporting concerns about children's medical care. Within a week, they'd received 47 calls. Within a month, over 300. Stories of children who couldn't speak being given medications that made them worse. Elderly patients whose families suspected their treatments were experimental. Disabled individuals being used as test subjects without proper consent. Each case was reviewed by a team of medical professionals and child advocates the foundation hired. Legitimate cases were referred to authorities. Families were connected with resources. And slowly, the foundation became known as a place where people could turn when they suspected medical abuse but didn't know who else to tell. Nathan and Caleb weren't involved in the day-to-day operations. They were still children, still healing. But they recorded a video for the website explaining why the foundation existed. They told their story simplified, age-appropriate, but honest, and they asked people to speak up when something felt wrong. "We couldn't speak for ourselves," Nathan said into the camera. "So we're asking you to speak for those who can't. Don't look away. Don't assume someone else is watching. Be the person who sees. Be the person who acts. Be the Rosa in someone's story." The video went viral. 15 million views in a week. Major news outlets wanted interviews. Medical organizations wanted to partner. Politicians wanted to associate themselves with the cause. It was overwhelming and exhausting, and exactly what the boys needed: proof that their suffering hadn't been meaningless, that something good could grow from something so dark. But success brought complications. Margaret's supporters, the few who remained, claimed the foundation was a publicity stunt, that the boys were being exploited by their father for profit, that the whole narrative was exaggerated or false. Despite the trial, despite the conviction, despite everything, there were still people who refused to believe a respected doctor could do what Margaret had done. One particularly vicious blogger started a campaign calling the boys liars. She claimed their recovery was too fast, too complete, that truly disabled children couldn't regain function the way Caleb and Nathan had. She suggested they'd been faking their disabilities all along as part of an elaborate con to destroy Margaret and profit from the publicity. Nathan found the blog post. Read every word. When Rosa found him, he was shaking with rage. "She's calling us liars. She says we made it up. All of it." Some people can't accept the truth when it's too horrible. It's easier for them to believe it's fake than to face what really happens in the world. But we're not lying. We have the medical records, the testimony, the conviction. How can she look at all of that and still call us liars? Because she's afraid. Afraid of what it means if we're telling the truth. Afraid of how many other Margaret Blackwells might exist. Afraid to question authority. So she attacks you instead because you're easier to dismiss than the system that failed you. I want to respond. I want to tell her, no, you don't give people like that your energy. You don't feed trolls. You just keep living, keep healing, keep helping others. That's how you win. But the attacks continued. Online and editorial pieces, even on some news channels that valued controversy over truth. The boys were called crisis actors, con artists, opportunistic liars. Their father was accused of coaching them. Rosa was called a gold digger. The foundation was labeled a scam. It hurt. God, it hurt. After everything they'd survived, after all they'd endured, to have people question whether their pain was even real, it was its own kind of torture. Caleb stopped eating for 3 days. Just sat in his room, staring at nothing, unreachable. When Dr. Chen finally got through to him, his signs were weak and shaky. What if they're right? What if we're remembering it wrong? What if it wasn't as bad as we think? Caleb, look at me. You have the medical records. You have your brother's testimony that matches yours. You have a jury that unanimously convicted your grandmother. You have dozens of other victims with similar stories. You are not wrong. You are not lying. And you are not crazy. Then why do people hate us? They don't hate you. They hate what you represent. You're proof that doctors can be monsters, that grandmothers can be abusers, that the systems we trust to protect children can fail catastrophically. That's terrifying for people, so they shoot the messenger instead of facing the message. I want it to stop. I want people to just believe us and leave us alone. I know, sweetheart, but here's the hard truth: they won't. There will always be doubters and conspiracy theorists and people who refuse to accept reality. You can't control that. You can only control how you respond, and the best response is to keep living your truth. Keep healing. Keep helping others. Let your life be the evidence. Nathan was handling the attacks differently with anger. He started responding to comments online, getting into arguments with strangers, trying to defend himself, and Caleb against every accusation. It was consuming him, turning him bitter and defensive. Rosa finally confronted him. You need to stop reading that garbage. I can't just let them say those things about us. Yes, you can. You have to, because engaging with them doesn't change their minds, it just poisons yours. But if I don't fight back, they win. No, baby. If you let them turn you angry and bitter and consumed with defending yourself, they win. If you spend your energy arguing with strangers instead of healing and growing and living, they win. The only way to actually win is to refuse to play their game. I don't know how to do that. You practice. Every time you want to respond to a comment, you close the laptop instead. Every time you want to prove yourself to someone who's already decided not to believe you, you walk away. Every time you feel that anger rising, you remind yourself that their opinion doesn't define your truth. It took weeks, months, slowly learning to let the noise be noise, to focus on the people who mattered to their family, their doctors, the families they were helping through the foundation. The rest was just static. By month 7 post-trial, the boys had made remarkable progress. Nathan was reading at a 6th grade level and devouring books like he was making up for lost time. Caleb had taught himself piano and played for hours every day, the music seeming to unlock something in him that words couldn't reach. They'd started regular school online at first, then 2 days a week at a small private academy that specialized in students with complex needs. Making friends was hard. The other kids knew who they were. Their story was too public, too dramatic to escape. Some kids treated them like celebrities, others like freaks. A few treated them like time bombs that might explode at any moment. But there was one girl, a quiet kid named Sophie, who used leg braces and laces and communicated with an AAC device who just treated them like people. She sat with them at lunch and shared her snacks and rolled her eyes at the other kids' whispers. When Nathan asked why she wasn't weirded out by them, she typed into her device, "Everyone's got trauma. Yours is just more public than most. Doesn't make you special, just makes you unlucky. But you're still just kids who like pizza and video games same as everyone else." Nathan laughed for the first time in weeks. "You're kinda mean." "I'm honest, there's a difference. You want friends who treat you normal or friends who treat you like glass?" "Normal." "Then stop acting like you're made of glass. You survived something horrible. Cool, now what? You gonna spend your whole life being the kids who were locked up? Or you gonna be kids who also happen to like basketball and dumb movies and arguing about which superhero would win in a fight?" It was exactly what they needed to hear. Permission to be more than their trauma. Permission to be whole people instead of just victims or survivors or symbols. Sophie became their bridge back to normalcy. Through her, they met other kids, started doing normal kid things. Badly played basketball games in the driveway, movie marathons where they argued about plot holes, group projects where they actually had to collaborate instead of just survive. It was messy and imperfect, and sometimes the trauma still crashed. Nathan would freeze during a crowded assembly. Caleb would need to leave class suddenly to decompress, but they were learning to live alongside their history instead of being consumed by it. At the 1-year anniversary of their freedom, the family gathered in the garden nestle where it all began. The garden where Rosa had first noticed Nathan's awareness. Where Caleb had looked at her with seeing eyes. Where everything had changed. Ethan had commissioned a small memorial there. Nothing elaborate, just a simple stone bench with an inscription, "For those who see the unseen and speak for the silenced." They sat together on that bench, Ethan, Rosa, Nathan, Caleb, and watched the sunset. No cameras, no reporters. No audience, just family. "You know what I think about sometimes," Nathan said. "What would have happened if Rosa hadn't taken this job? If someone else had been hired, would we still be in those chairs?" "Maybe," Rosa said, "or maybe someone else would have noticed eventually. Maybe you would have found a way to show someone. You're fighters. You would have survived." "But you saw us first. You risked everything. Why," Rosa was quiet for a moment, "I told you about my son Miguel, about how he died because I trusted a doctor who was careless. What I didn't tell you is that I saw signs something was wrong. Small things. The way Miguel got sleepy after his medication. How he seemed confused sometimes. I noticed, but I didn't speak up because I thought, what do I know? I'm not a doctor. And that silence cost me my son." She looked at the boys. "When I saw you two, when I saw those little movements and that awareness, I knew I had a choice. Stay silent again and lose someone else, or speak up and risk everything. I chose to speak up because I couldn't live with myself if I stayed quiet again. Not because I'm brave, because staying silent already destroyed me once. I couldn't survive it happening again." Caleb signed, "You saved us to save yourself." "I saved you because it was right. But yes, saving you also saved me. It gave me a purpose, a reason, a way to make Miguel's death mean something. So thank you for letting me be part of your story, for giving me a chance to be the person I couldn't be for my own son." Nathan leaned against her. You're family now, you know that, right? I know. Good, because we're kind of a lot to deal with, and we need you. Rosa laughed through tears. You're definitely a lot, but you're worth it. Ethan cleared his throat. I've been thinking about something, about how we've been living in this mansion in the same space where everything bad happened. The boys sleep in the same rooms where they were drugged. They walk past the study where Margaret kept those files. Every corner has memories. What are you saying? Rosa asked. I'm saying maybe it's time to start fresh. New house, new city if you want. Somewhere without ghosts. Somewhere we choose together. Nathan and Caleb exchanged glances. Then Nathan signed he'd been learning too to communicate with Caleb when words were too hard. Can Rosa come? Ethan smiled. I was hoping she would, if she wants to, not as an employee, as family. Rosa's hands shook. You don't have to. We want to, Ethan interrupted. You're not our maid. You're not our employee. You're the woman who saved my sons and helped me become the father I should have been all along. You're part of us, if you want to be. Of course I want to be. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Caleb signed. Where would we go? Anywhere you want. We'll look at houses together. Find something that feels right. Something bright and full of windows and nothing like here. A real home. They moved 4 months later to a house by the coast. It was smaller than the mansion, only 12 rooms instead of 52, but it was filled with light and color and the sound of the ocean. Each boy got to design their own room. Nathan chose blue walls and bookshelves that covered every surface. Caleb chose soft greens and a corner for his piano. Rosa had a suite on the same floor as the boys, so she could hear them if they needed her. Ethan took the room with the office space where he could work from home and actually be present. The first night in the new house, they ordered pizza and ate on the floor because the furniture hadn't arrived yet. They played card games and talked about nothing important and laughed until their sides hurt. It was chaotic and imperfect and exactly what a family should be. Before bed, Nathan asked, Dad, are you happy? Yeah, buddy, I really am, are you? Nathan considered. I'm getting there. I think happy is something we have to practice, like physical therapy for emotions. Some days are good, some days are hard. But we're trying. That counts for something. It counts for everything. That night, for the first time in their lives, Caleb and Nathan fell asleep. Not to the sound of silence and fear, but to the sound of waves crashing outside their windows and Rosa humming down the hall and their father's voice drifting up from downstairs as he talked on the phone with Dr. Chen, planning the next phase of their healing. They fell asleep knowing they were safe, knowing they were seen, knowing they were loved. And in the morning, they woke up free. 2 years later, Nathan wrote a book. Not a memoir, he said he wasn't ready for that yet. A children's book called The Boy Who Couldn't Move But Could See Everything. It was about a child trapped in his own body who watches the world go by, waiting for someone to notice he's there. It ended with someone finally seeing him and helping him break free. The book sold millions of copies. It was translated into 37 languages. It became required reading in medical schools across the country as a reminder to really see their patients, to look beyond the diagnosis to the person inside. Caleb composed a piece of music called Emergence. It started with a single repeating note, heavy, monotonous, like a heartbeat under sedation. Slowly, other notes joined. The melody grew. The rhythm changed. It built and built until it exploded into something joyful and chaotic and alive. He performed it at a gala for the foundation, and there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. The foundation grew. Started programs in schools to teach children to advocate for themselves medically. Funded research into recovery from medical trauma. Provided legal support for families fighting abusive care. By year 3, they'd helped over 2,000 families and prevented countless cases of medical abuse. Margaret died in prison in year 4. Heart attack. She was 75. The warden called Ethan to inform him and asked if he wanted to claim the body. Ethan said no. She was cremated, and her ashes were sent to the medical school that had trained her, along with a letter from Ethan explaining what she'd done and asking that her story be used to teach future doctors what happens when ego and control trump empathy and care. When the boys learned of her death, their reaction surprised everyone. Not relief, not celebration, just a quiet, complicated sadness. I thought I'd feel free when she died, Nathan said, but I already was free. Her dying doesn't change anything, except now she'll never have to face what she did. She gets to escape. We don't. Caleb signed, maybe that's her punishment. She dies knowing she lost, knowing her grandsons survived, knowing her legacy is shame instead of respect. That's worse than prison. They didn't attend any memorial, didn't acknowledge her passing publicly, just kept living, kept healing, kept proving that she hadn't broken them. By year 5, both boys were thriving. Nathan was reading at college level and talking about becoming a lawyer to help other abuse victims. Caleb was composing music professionally and teaching piano to other kids with disabilities. They still had hard days. Trauma doesn't have an expiration date, but they had more good days than bad. They had friends and hobbies and dreams that had nothing to do with their past. They had lives. Rosa became their legal guardian alongside Ethan, not because they needed her to be, but because they wanted her to be. She adopted the last name Martinez Blackwell and wore it proudly. Her daughter Maria became the boy's sister in all the ways that mattered. They were family-chosen, complicated, perfectly imperfect family. On the 10-year anniversary of the day Rosa first saw Nathan's finger move, they returned to Elena's grave together. The boys were 15 now, taller, stronger, still healing, but unmistakably alive. Nathan spoke first. "Mom, I'm 15. I'm applying to high schools. I want to study law and advocacy. I'm going to spend my life making sure what happened to us doesn't happen to other kids. I think you'd be proud of that." Caleb signed Rosa, translating aloud. "I'm composing a symphony. It's called Elena. It's about losing someone before you can know them, about grief for what never was, about finding them anyway in the people who loved them. It's about you. I'll perform it next year. I wish you could hear it." Ethan knelt by the grave. "Elena, I kept my promise. I protected our boys. I fought for them. I gave them the life you wanted them to have. They're extraordinary. They're kind and brave and so much stronger than I ever was. You'd love them. God, you'd love them so much." Rosa added quietly, "I never met you, Elena, but I see you in your sons every day, in Nathan's fierce protection of anyone vulnerable, in Caleb's quiet empathy, in their determination to turn pain into purpose. You raised them even in the short time you had. That never left them. Thank you for that. Thank you for giving the world these boys." They stayed until sunset talking to Elena about everything and nothing, about school and music and the foundation and the new dog they'd adopted, a rescue named Hope who'd been abused but was learning to trust again. Walking back to the car, Nathan said, "You know what's weird? I spent 10 years trapped and now I spend most of my time thinking about the future instead of the past. When did that happen?" "When you decided the past didn't get to define you," Rosa said. "When you chose who you wanted to become instead of letting trauma choose for you." "Do you think we'll ever be fully okay, like normal people okay?" "I think you'll be your own version of okay. Maybe not the same as people who didn't go through what you did, but whole, happy, free. That's what matters." Caleb signed, "I don't want to be normal anyway. Normal people don't see the things we see, don't understand the things we understand. Normal sounds boring." Nathan laughed. "Yeah, we've survived too much to be boring now." That night, back at the house by the coast, the family gathered for dinner. Real dinner, home cooked loud and chaotic, with everyone talking over each other and arguing about whose turn it was to do dishes. It was ordinary and precious, and everything the Blackwell mansion had never been. After dinner, Nathan pulled out a piece of paper he'd been working on. "I wrote something for the foundation website. Want to hear it?" "Always," Ethan said. Nathan read, "My name is Nathan Blackwell. I'm 15 years old. 10 years ago, I was a prisoner in my own body, silenced by someone who was supposed to protect me. But I'm not a prisoner anymore. I'm a survivor. I'm a fighter. I'm someone who refuses to let trauma define me. And I'm telling you this not because I want your pity or your praise. I'm telling you this because somewhere out there, there's a kid who's trapped right now, who can't move or speak or ask for help, who's waiting for someone to see them. Be that someone. Look past the diagnosis. Look past the wheelchair. Look past the silence. See the person inside because they're there. They're always there. And they're waiting for someone brave enough to notice." The room was silent. Then Rosa started clapping. Then Ethan. Then Caleb, his hands moving in applause through sign. And Nathan smiled. Not the broken, hesitant smile of a boy still learning how to be human, but the confident, genuine smile of someone who'd survived the impossible and chosen to use that survival to save others. "You think it's okay?" Nathan asked. "It's perfect," Ethan said. "You're perfect, both of you, just as you are." And in that moment, in that house by the ocean, surrounded by the family they'd built from trauma and choice and love, the boys who'd been prisoners became the men they were meant to be. They were Nathan and Caleb Blackwell. They were survivors. They were advocates. They were brothers. They were sons. They were healers. And they were finally, beautifully, completely free.